Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was summoned to Hogwarts Harry Potter. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Reidluver, link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, Magic and Chakra Clash. You'll be gone for 2 years? Gaara asked. The blonde grinned widely as he squatted on the hospital bed, almost cat-like. Yeah. Pervy Sage will teach me how to defend myself against the Akatsuki. I'll probably learn all sorts of new jutsu, and I'll come back so powerful I'll be able to rescue Sasuke and become Hokage. Gaara's mouth twitched as he stood with his arms folded. Naruto was always so full of energy, so dedicated to his dreams, so dedicated to his friends. Of that, he was grateful for. Maybe he could share the same dream as Naruto. He had been thinking about becoming Kazekage for a while now. They had just recently returned from rescuing Matsuri from the Shiten Shounen, and both boys were now fully recovered from their injuries. Naruto's hospital attire was haphazardly strewn about the unkempt bed, while Gaara's was nicely made, his gourd resting against the side. Right now they were biding their time to be released from the hospital. Suddenly there was a puff of smoke and the familiar copy ninja appeared, holding his right hand up in a greeting. Kakashi-sensei, why don't you use the door like a normal person? Naruto said with a whine. The Jounin smiled, or at least Gaara thought he did. The redhead was still working on reading the masked man's emotions. It's more fun this way, was his choice of a reply. He then turned to Naruto, both hands in his pockets lazily. So, Naruto, are you ready to be gone for the next 2 years with Jiraiya? The genin sniggered. Yep. Once I get out of here, I'm gonna pack everything and meet him at the entrance to the village. Without warning, the three shinobi sensed something foreboding in the room. Kakashi and Naruto quickly grabbed some kunai and shuriken from their weapon pouches while Gaara's sand vibrated restlessly in the gourd. Nothing happened for a few seconds and they could sense no other life form in the room. As Naruto opened his mouth to speak, Gaara unwittingly gasped in shock. His entire body was starting to disappear as if he were dissolving in the air. There was also some strange type of purple electricity that surrounded his body and crackled like fire. Gaara! Naruto leapt from the bed and grabbed his friend's shoulder, only to find himself disappearing in the same manner the instant they made contact. Stop, Naruto! Kakashi tried to save his student, but only found himself being dragged along. At this moment Sakura burst in, having heard Naruto's yells and thought Naruto had done something stupid again. She was prepared to dismiss them from the hospital, yet she froze at the sight of the three fading before her eyes. As she ran towards them, they vanished with the purple electricity fading not long after. Tsunade-sama! After feeling like they had been sucked through a small pipe, the three ninja found themselves collapsing on a cold, hard floor that was also, annoyingly, damp. Naruto groaned then gasped when he discovered himself in a room of people all wearing black cloaks, sticks in their hands, and large pots on tables in front of them. He guessed they were all participating in some type of arcane cooking ritual, if the bubbling purple, green, orange, and pink bottles were anything to go by. They all appeared extremely shocked and afraid. You should see the looks on your faces. Naruto laughed. His laughter shortly ended when he heard the people speaking to one another in some weird language and accent. Where are we? He demanded. When they didn't answer he growled and drew his kunai. They all seemed rather harmless, but they had summoned him and his friends with a type of chakra Naruto had never encountered before, and he wasn't about to take any chances. I said. Naruto made sure to speak slowly, as if it would help them understand him better. Where are we? Everyone started to back up inch by inch as they eyed the weapon warily. Naruto sighed in frustration. Why did you bring us here if you're not going to answer us? He started to walk forward but was stalled by Kakashi's hand firmly grasping his shoulder. If you haven't noticed, Naruto, they don't speak the same language we do. At this Naruto glanced back at the strange people and lowered the arm with his kunai sheepishly. Turning his attention to Gaara, the blonde helped him to his feet, because they had apparently fallen on the poor redhead. Cautiously, a girl with brown, bushy hair stepped forward, much to the protest of the tall red-haired boy next to her. She asked, Who are you? Her accent was strange, but it seemed she was able to speak their language. Naruto sighed in relief. At least someone understood them. He pointed to himself, puffing out his chest proudly. I am Uzumaki Naruto, a shinobi from the village hidden in the leaves. The girl cocked her eyebrow, not seeming to understand what he meant. Shinobi? A village called hidden in the leaves? What's he talking about? Hermione wondered to herself. Hermione? What are you doing? Oh, be quiet, Ronald. She swatted his hand away. I'm trying to find out who they are. She peered at the peculiar people before her. This Uzumaki Naruto was dressed in the brightest shade of orange she had ever seen. He had drawn an odd knife from behind so fast it was almost like magic. And were those whiskers on his face? Was he a type of magical creature she had never read about? Impossible. Then there was that tall one, with silver hair that seemed to defy all laws of science, and only his right eye was visible. She guessed he was only in his late 20s, though with that hair color she couldn't be too sure. Finally there was another boy to his left. She had thought the Weasley family had bright red hair, but they had nothing on him. He also didn't appear to have eyebrows, and he had such thick black circles around his eyes she concluded it was either that he wore a lot of eyeliner, or he was the world's biggest insomniac. There was also an interesting symbol of the first two strangers' headbands they wore around their forehead. It was a spiral with a triangle on the side. Get Professor Dumbledore, she hissed. There was a chance that newcomers weren't too much of a threat, but with the fact that they got inside a castle you shouldn't be able to apparate into, and the two youngest seemed to give off some foreboding aura, she couldn't be sure. Snape suddenly appeared beside her, staring so intensely at the three strangers that the blonde gripped his knife tighter and put himself in a defensive stance. Are you able to communicate with them, Ms. Granger? She nodded. I have a rudimentary understanding of all the main languages. These people are speaking a form of Japanese, but they are referencing things I don't understand. At this the potions teacher frowned. Well, we can only wait for the headmaster to come. He took a step forward. In response, the oldest put his right arm in front of the blonde and placed himself between the boy and Snape, clearly giving the impression that he would not allow any harm to come to them. Hermione hardly saw a need. Even though the two boys seemed no older than her and her friends, she got the feeling that they were extremely capable of taking care of themselves judging by the way they carried themselves. The man spoke. Where are we? It wasn't a question. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The shinobi were all immediately confused. What was a witchcraft, and what was a wizardry? Naruto wondered. The dungeon door burst open, and Naruto fought the urge to laugh as an old man with a beard as long as Pervy Sage's hair came rushing through. He wore glasses that were cut in half, and he wore a strange type of long, glittery, and turquoise dress. His eyes, however, had the same kindness and power as the third Hokage's did, Naruto noted nostalgically. The old man talked in the different language to the brown-haired girl before turning to them with a warm smile. Welcome. At least his accent was decent. I see Ms. Granger has already informed you, but you are in a dungeon of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I am the headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, and these are some of the students. He gestured to the terrified kids against the wall, whom the three shinobi glanced at out of the corner of their eyes. They're a bunch of pre-genin scaredy cats, Naruto concluded. My name is Hatake Kakashi, his sensei began, taking control of the situation. This is Uzumaki Naruto, and Gaara of the desert. How did we get here and why did you summon us? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, and he replied, I assure you that none of us intended for your arrival. As for how you came here, that shall be what we will attempt to find out. He surveyed the room one last time before ordering, come along with me. There is no need to fear, so you may put your weapon away, young man. Naruto scowled, I promise that no harm shall befall you. He waited as the group silently decided what to do, before Kakashi nodded and gestured for Gaara and Naruto to go ahead of him, taking up the rear for extra protection. The entire class held their breath until the strange visitors completely exited the dungeon. Blimey! Who were they? Ron asked. Kakashi was the oldest, Naruto was the one in orange, and Gaara was the other one, Hermione said. What language were you speaking? Harry asked. Japanese. I'm not very good, but I did learn the basics on my own in my spare time. I believe a general knowledge of different languages will benefit me in the future, she said proudly as a few people rolled their eyes. They said they were shinobi from a hidden leaf village. Do you think they could be some sort of elf? Seamus piped up. Everyone shrugged. I would appreciate it if you'd follow me, Mr. Longbottom, Snape said, in a sneer harsher than usual. And bring your cauldron with you. Poor Neville hastily obeyed, clearly humiliated and not wanting to go anywhere with Snape. He had little reason not to. They had been working on concocting a very complicated potion that even Hermione was having trouble with, and as soon as Neville added the last ingredient his purple potion fizzed and most of it flew up into the air like a form of liquid cloud, swirling around in a spiral shape, while a type of lightning emanated from it. After a few minutes it rested on the ground and slowly faded away, revealing the three strangers. What did Neville do? By nightfall, the whole school was discussing the newcomers, and many had their own theories about how they got there, with some first years having the most outrageous suggestions. Some said they were people from the past, some said from the future, while some theories believed them to be an entirely new species of creature that mutated over the years in the Forbidden Forest, but they came out of hiding to enact their revenge on Hogwarts. Harry was simply amazed. This school year had started out with so many surprises. First, he traveled to the Burrow via the Flynn network. With Mr. Weasley and the twins tormenting his family, he would never get over the sight of Dudley once he ate the Tuntung toffee. There was the mayhem with the Quidditch World Cup, the Dark Mark, his dream, and finally the Triwizard Tournament. Not to mention the upcoming arrival of the Durmstrang and Beauxbatons students at the end of the month. Deciding there was no further need to dwell on such heavy subjects, Harry fell into a blissful sleep in the comfort of the four-poster bed. There was a door ajar at the end of a passage. The only source of light came from the flickering of a fire that was large enough to provide just enough warmth for the inhabitants. In sight of the open door was a large chair, and there seemed to be something in it, but there was no way to get a better look. There was a short stump of a man with a long black cloak and bald patch on his head pacing between the fire and the chair. My lord, the short man began, preparations are already underway. If we abandon the plan. We will not abandon the plan, Wormtail, a raspy and cold voice said. That plan will continue. This is merely a small diversion, one that will work alongside the original plan so that I may become more powerful. Wormtail fell to his knees in front of the chair, and held his hands up in a pleading way. Master, are you sure they have the powers you speak of? You never mentioned them until. That's because they were never here before, you fool, the Dark Lord snapped. I only felt their presence today, and they hold more power than you could ever imagine, he said almost dreamily, and that is why we must take it for ourselves, or else Dumbledore will find a way to use them against me, and I fear I might not be able to resist ones with such power. Wormtail gasped, afraid to speak. People more powerful than the Dark Lord? In his mind he feared what would happen if his master gained even more power than he already had, yet he quickly dismissed it, since his master was able to see into his thoughts. Apparently the Dark Lord didn't notice, he noted with relief. So, what would you have me do, master? The Dark Lord gave a small chuckle. Inform my faithful servant in Hogwarts of the extra preparations he must make, and make it clear that this is very important. Wormtail nodded fervently before suddenly disappearing. The room was silent for a little while, and then the Dark Lord began to laugh. Slowly at first, but then it grew in intensity until the whole house shook with his laughter and happiness. If this new plan succeeded, there would be no one who could stand in his way, not even the infamous Harry Potter. The dark-haired boy woke up with a jolt and rubbed his scar. Strange, he thought groggily. I don't remember Voldemort being this happy before. Then he drifted off to sleep, only to completely forget about his dream in the morning. Chapter 2: Surprises and Supplies. The peculiar group wound their way through the school, and the three shinobi were in awe of how seemingly endless it appeared to be. Coming out of the dungeons had been rather uneventful, but when they started up the first set of stairs, Naruto yelped in surprise when a portrait asked him where he was from. Of course, the blonde had no idea what the portrait was asking him. All he cared about was the fact that it was speaking to him. As he jumped behind Kakashi, Gaara sent out his sand to surround the moving picture for questioning, only to discover that he no longer had his sand with him. Slightly put out, Gaara simply glared at the oddly dressed man who quickly vacated his portrait as fast as he could, furious for feeling so helpless. His sand had been with him ever since he could remember, and even though he had used it to murder innocent victims before he learned that there was more to life than killing, it still left him experiencing a deep sense of loneliness. He would have to find some sand at this Hogwarts and begin to mold his chakra into it. Dumbledore's eye twinkled as he held back laughter and explained to the ninja that here at Hogwarts there were surprises around every corner, but they had nothing to fear. With that said, the three shinobi were able to hold back their surprise at encountering suits of armor also capable of speech and staircases that liked to change. However, Naruto was not prepared for what lay in store at the entrance to Dumbledore's office. They were walking along while Dumbledore calmly informed them about the different houses at Hogwarts, how they worked together, and how classes were carried out, when nearly headless Nick appeared from behind a wall. He was rambling on about how he heard a rumor that there were foreigners inside Hogwarts. Naruto froze, his eyes bulged to an amazing size, knees trembling, and beads of sweat poured down his face as his whole frame shook like he was experiencing a seizure. Kakashi gulped, recalling all too well of Naruto's great fear of ghosts, realizing that this would not go over well. When Sir Nicholas turned to face Naruto, the young shinobi let out a shriek that reverberated throughout the entire school and onto the grounds. Even Hagrid's dog, Fong, whined at the noise. After about a minute of screaming, Naruto began running up the closest wall in a desperate attempt to escape one of his worst fears. Dumbledore was amazed at the display. He had never seen anyone run up a wall on all fours before. Perhaps these visitors had more surprises up their sleeves than he originally believed. With a sigh, Kakashi sprinted up the wall after him, uncovering his left eye in the process. When his frightened pupil swung around to face him, he unveiled his Sharingan and put Naruto to sleep. A few seconds later, Kakashi landed softly on the ground with an unconscious Naruto tucked under his arm. "Please continue," he apologized. "He'll wake up soon enough." Dumbledore nodded, kindly excused himself from Sir Nicholas, and muttered the password, "Canary Cream," the winged creature before him to rotate upwards, revealing a spiral staircase. Gaara eyed the retreating ghost warily, not particularly fond of ghosts either. Inside Dumbledore's office, Naruto slowly woke up, and after being assured that there were no more ghosts, at least in the room, he calmly stood between Gaara and Kakashi in front of Dumbledore's desk. As they examined the strange room with curiosity, an old woman dressed in a dark green dress, black hat with a crooked tip, and small glasses burst through the door. "Albus, is it true?" she asked in alarm. Then her gaze rested on the three ninjas in front of her, and she gasped, resting her hand on her chest. She turned slowly to the headmaster. "How could they have possibly come here?" she inquired, a little more calmly. "I do not know, Minerva," he answered with a shake of his head. "But I trust that Severus will." At that second the door burst open a second time. "Ah," he finished. "Headmaster," Snape began, lowering his head slightly, "I believe we shall find that the answer lies within Mr. Longbottom's cauldron." Dumbledore nodded. Yes, of course. But first, I believe we must help our guests here be better able to understand what's going on." At that he stepped out from behind his desk and drifted towards the fidgety trio. Naruto's hand kept drifting over to his weapons pouch, and Gaara appeared to be flexing his fingers in irritation at the absence of his sand. Listening to a language they didn't know in a strange magical place was unnerving. Kakashi was the only one who appeared to be relaxed, but he kept surveying the room, anticipating all possible courses of escape should the situation require it. "There is a spell I can do that will act as a translator, so you can communicate with the rest of us, and they can communicate with you," Dumbledore began in their language. He examined all three for a moment. "May I see your?" He gestured to their foreheads. "Our Hitayatesh, forehead protectors," Kakashi informed him. Dumbledore nodded. "If you let me see your Hitayatesh, then I can put the spell on it. And you can still speak in your own language when you take them off, or concentrate very hard when you wear them," he added when Naruto opened his mouth in protest. The three shinobi were relieved. It was highly unlikely that they would have the time to discard them if they were in trouble so they could fight properly. Their jutsu probably wouldn't work if they spoke this other language. When Dumbledore extended his hand, they relinquished their symbols of ninja rank. Gaara did so easily, not all that attached to his village. Naruto did so reluctantly because it was the one Iruka-sensei gave him, and Kakashi was hesitant as well. After being cursed with that scar on his left eye for over a decade, he was used to stares, but that didn't mean he necessarily enjoyed them. He groaned mentally as he untied the cloth. If Dumbledore was surprised, he showed no inclination. However, the other wizards in the room weren't as skilled at concealing emotions. The Green Witch let out a small gasp as she looked at him with pitying eyes, the greasy man in black with an abnormally large nose cocked his eyebrows in surprise, and the young one who carried a black pot whimpered slightly, although Kakashi surmised that it was due more to the fact that he was dragged to this strange room by the dark-haired wizard. The old man laid each Hittite in his hand, then withdrew a long stick and aimed it at the cloths, muttering a long string of words underneath his breath and moving the stick in a circle. Once he was finished, there was a flash of blue light, and the spell was completed. With a smile, Dumbledore handed back the Hitayatesh, and once the ninja placed them in their appropriate places, they experienced a tingling sensation that lasted for a few seconds. "Now let me see that cauldron of yours, Neville." As the headmaster inspected the pot, he turned to Snape. "What potion did you have them make, Severus?" "The Accidelian potion, headmaster." Dumbledore appeared thoughtful for a moment, stroking his white beard absent-mindedly. "Were you all summoned here, or was it one particular person?" he inquired of the shocked ninjas, who were amazed at the fact that they could understand everyone speaking now. "It was me," Gaara said simply. The headmaster examined the redhead for a moment before taking out his wand and pointed it into his other hand. "Aranis," he mumbled. Suddenly a red static discharge burst from the wand tip into Dumbledore's hand, and sand appeared as if falling from an hourglass. Once it was finished, he held out the hand of sand to Gaara. "Can you do anything with this?" Kakashi was amazed at how the stick created sand out of nowhere, and decided that he would have to copy the movements of these wizards and their sticks with his Sharingan someday. Gaara frowned at the sand, then nodded and extended his hand palm up where Dumbledore deposited the minuscule grains. The Suna shinobi covered them with his other hand and closed his eyes in concentration, molding his chakra into it. The wizards were shocked when blue energy surrounded his cupped hands, vibrating with life. After a minute or so, Gaara opened his eyes and unfolded his hands, palms facing the old man with spectacles, and commanded the sand to circle around him in thin lines. Neville's eyes widened in astonishment, as well as Snape and McGonagall, while Dumbledore chuckled. After making his point, Gaara summoned the sand back to him and attached it to his right hand like a glove. Even though it was a small amount, he was at least properly armed now. I see my suspicions were correct. You see, the Accidelian potion is used to transform any substance it touches into sand, Dumbledore explained, which can be very useful depending on your situation. It seems that Neville, he gestured to the fidgety boy to his left, made a few errors in his preparation, and instead of harboring the ability to transform sand, it summoned a person capable of controlling it. Dumbledore then gave them a pitying glance. The only problem is that I have no idea whether you three were summoned from another dimension or another place in time. You mean we won't be able to go back home? Naruto said, clearly distraught. Albus Dumbledore is the greatest wizard of our time, McGonagall assured them. If there is a way to send you back, he will find it. Dumbledore waved off the compliment. Yes, yes. I will put all my efforts into achieving any means to send you back to your home, but for now you are guests at our school and may learn magic alongside your pupils if you wish, to keep you from being bored. It appears that you have some magical potential. Chakra, Naruto corrected him, before he could stop himself. What you call chakra, Dumbledore continued, so I see no reason in not being able to give you permission to learn. Our gamekeeper Hagrid will take you to Diagon Alley to purchase supplies, and he should actually be here any minute. As if on cue, the steel doors reverberated 3 solid knocks, and Dumbledore bade him enter. Naruto gasped at the sight of the large man. His face was obscured by a shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard. He wore a large brown cloak with many pockets, and his beady eyes shone out like black beetles. What did ye need me for, Professor Dumbledore? He asked. Just who I wanted to see. He gestured to the shinobi. Through an unfortunate accident, they have been summoned to our school, and until we discover where they belong, they shall stay at Hogwarts, and they would appreciate it if you would take them to Diagon Alley. Hagrid glanced at the strange group of people before nodding his agreement. Now, if you excuse us, Severus, I believe you have a class to run, and Neville, you have more classes to attend. The greasy man vacated the office with a tiny glance over his shoulder, while Neville turned to the headmaster. I am sorry for causing so much trouble, he muttered, not meeting the headmaster's eyes. It's all right, Neville, you didn't mean to, Dumbledore said. Then he placed his hands on Neville's shoulders and whispered so that only Neville could hear. I must say, though, that summoning 3 people from across time and space like that is something only a great and powerful wizard can accomplish. Your parents would be proud. Then he winked and sent Neville on his way. The poor boy stood there for a moment, then when it sunk in that Dumbledore called him a great wizard, blushed with embarrassment, and his eyes watered. He quickly shuffled to the door. Oh, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone what happened here, Dumbledore called after Neville. Now Hagrid, here are the items you need to get them. Naruto turned to Gaara. Do you think we'll ever get home? He wondered fearfully. All his hard work and effort he had put into his short 13 years of life were all for the dream of becoming Hokage. If he never went home, what would he do with the rest of his life? His friend simply shrugged. Dumbledore seems to have great power, so he might be able to send us home. If a mere student could bring us here, I'm sure he'd be able to send us back. Besides, Kakashi interjected. Think of this as a mission, a reconnaissance mission. Naruto squinted. Recon AI sense? His sensei chuckled. It means that you gather as much information about the enemy, or a new area as you can to see if it's dangerous or not. While we stay here we can learn all about this magic and use it to our advantage when we go back home. This information we have could prove valuable should we encounter enemies with their same power, and to maybe developing a new jutsu. His student's mood rapidly changed from depressed to excited in a matter of seconds. A new jutsu? All by myself? Maybe I could make the greatest jutsu ever that's only worthy of a Hokage. As the two attempted to calm the rambunctious child, Professor McGonagall was observing them and listening in on their conversation. Right. Dumbledore clapped his hands, signaling to the 3 that he was finished with Hagrid. You will travel to Diagon Alley by Flowpowder. Naruto smirked. Flowpowder? What kind of name is that? He whispered to Gaara. The redhead had to agree, it was a rather strange name. Hagrid, if you may show our guests? Dumbledore said. He gestured to a wide fireplace behind them and to their right. Of course. Dumbledore performed a quick flick of his wand and the fireplace mantle shot up, adding quite a few more feet. They watched curiously as the large man grabbed a handful of a very fine powder, stepped into the enlarged fireplace, and yelled, Diagon alley. He then threw the powder down and became enveloped in powerful green flames, vanishing as the fire did. There was silence as they pondered this new method of travel, before Naruto bellowed, You can travel by fire? I want to go next. The method of travel was quite appealing, but the other two were more suspicious. How would you avoid getting burned? Was this the wizard's way of getting rid of them? Were the kind words spoken to them from before used to lull them into a false sense of security? Those wizards had been speaking in another language before they were able to understand just what was being discussed. Before Kakashi could stop him, Naruto jumped into the fireplace and repeated the process. He disappeared in powerful flames that consumed his body. Kakashi swung around to face Dumbledore with a skeptic look on his face. This is not a trick? The old man shook his head. This is the fastest and most efficient way for you to travel such a long distance, and I assure you that Naruto is all right. The copy ninja figured all he could do was trust the old man, yet before he could follow Naruto, Gaara was already in the fireplace and had just finished the incantation. As soon as the flames disappeared, Kakashi followed suit. Once his view of Dumbledore's office disappeared, Kakashi felt himself being sucked through a small hole. He was spinning so fast he started to feel a little nauseous, but then suddenly everything stopped and his feet landed on cold tile. He stumbled out of the fireplace and noticed Gaara and Naruto were experiencing the same nausea he was. Don't worry, Hagrid chuckled. After a while you get used to it. The shinobi only grunted in reply. Follow me. The new room they found themselves in was a dark and shabby place. It was obviously a bar with a few customers quietly drinking and smoking. The bald and toothless bartender smiled at them. When he noticed Hagrid, he walked over to them while wiping the inside of a glass. After glancing at his three guests with a curious eye, the bartender sighed. Here on Hogwarts business again, I presume? Hagrid nodded. Don't worry, Tom, I'll come back another time. As they turned to follow Hagrid, Kakashi noticed all the customers turn and face them. Some sputtered in their drinks at the sight, and Kakashi sighed. Was this going to happen wherever they went? It's not like they were dressed that strangely, right? Why are we in such a small room, Hagrid? Naruto piped up once they entered a closet of some sort with a large, red brick wall on one side. Won't be small for long. Hagrid pulled out a pink umbrella and muttered to himself. 3 up 2 across stand back. After tapping a brick 3 times with the tip of his umbrella, it quivered, then wriggled, and a small hole in the middle grew wider and wider until there was an archway that even Hagrid could fit through easily. The 3 shinobi gazed in awe at the brightly colored shops that adorned the cobbled street. Each found themselves wishing they could read the signs that hung over each shop, yet from the displays in the windows, one could make a fair assessment. There were cauldrons similar to what the Neville boy carried, a library, a various assortment of owls, candy shops, and one that displayed odd brooms like they were valuable. Hagrid! Hagrid! Naruto tugged on the man's cloak sleeve and pointed to a shop. Why is there a store for brooms? Hagrid frowned, but once he saw where Naruto was pointing, let out a cheerful laugh. Those aren't just any brooms, he said. Wizards use them to fly and play Quidditch. Fly? Naruto squealed. That's so cool. I want to fly. Hagrid chuckled. Maybe at the school we can get Yet to try a school broom later. Yeah. I can't wait. Hagrid smiled as the blonde jumped up and down. He then turned to face the redhead that was evidently trying to conceal his amazement at everything in Diagon Alley, giving off the impression that he was bored. Hagrid had been around enough kids to know differently, though. Shifting his gaze to Kakashi, Hagrid noted that he seemed the most comfortable. His hands were stuck in his pockets and glanced from shop to shop curiously as they made their way down the narrow street. Hey, Hagrid? What's that? Naruto was pointed to a large white building. Ah, Gringotts. A wizard's bank run by goblins and protected by dragons. I had a dragon once, you know, he muttered nostalgically. Everyone looked at him in alarm. Real dragons? Gaara asked with a hint of fear in his voice. Yep. But the really magnificent creatures, nothing to worry about, Hagrid said. Gaara scowled and muttered something about not being scared. Well, this is where you get your wands. I've got to go to the bank, so I'll catch up with ya in a little bit. With that he bade them goodbye and left them in front of a green shop with gold lettering. They entered silently and found themselves in a dimly lit room that had some chairs, a desk, and then rows and rows of thin boxes piled as high as the ceiling. "Good afternoon, welcome to Soft Voice." The ninja turned around to see an elderly man with silver eyes peeking behind one of the rows of boxes. If he found their appearance odd, he didn't show it. "Hold out your one arm," he ordered calmly, pulling out a tape measure with silver markings out of his pocket. When he was met with confused stares, he added, "The one you write with." They each held out their right arm and gasped in amazement as the tape measure began taking measurements on its own. When it was finished, the man nodded and walked over to the boxes. "My name is Mr. Ollivander," he announced politely as he rummaged through them. "Naruto. Gaara. Kakashi." He kept his composure neutral, but Mr. Ollivander could tell these visitors were most unusual. The energy they harnessed was in a more complicated and complex pattern throughout their body than wizards. The implications of their power excited him. He hadn't felt this giddy since the day the young Mr. Harry Potter came into his shop. "Here you go, young man," Ollivander announced, carrying an oak-colored wand to the boy in orange. 11 inches. Oak. Very sturdy. Give it a slight flick of the wrist, releasing some of your magic. "Chakra," the boy corrected. "Chakra into it. Quite peculiar." Naruto eagerly grasped the wand and charged it with so much chakra it glowed blue, then exploded in a shower of blue sparks. Naruto yelped as his sleeve was singed. "How about this?" Mr. Ollivander suggested sadly. He never had a customer blow up his precious wands before. Having a wand not work was exciting because it presented a challenge, but in all those instances the wand was still intact. Just make sure to put a little bit of your chakra into it. Naruto grinned sheepishly and controlled the amount of chakra he put into the next wand. As he slashed it down, it let out a shower of red and gold sparks, to which Mr. Ollivander nodded. "Very good. That was ebony and unicorn hair, 8.5 inches springy." Then he turned to Gaara, who was more controlled than Naruto with his use of the wands. A few minutes later they were finished with their selection, Gaara with a 9-inch willow and unicorn hair wand, and Kakashi with an 11-inch yew and phoenix feather. Just then Hagrid burst through the doors, and after saying hello to Mr. Ollivander, paid for the wands and led them out the door. Very powerful people, Mr. Ollivander thought to himself as they left. Very powerful indeed. "Hagrid," Kakashi protested. "We don't want to put you at an inconvenience." The half-giant waved him off. "Don't worry. Hogwarts has a fun fair students who can afford materials. Besides, it's the least we can do fair bringing ye here against your will." With that said, they continued on to purchase the rest of the supplies. By the time they were gratefully back at Hogwarts, flip powder quickly became their least favorite method of travel. It was past dinner time. "Tomorrow you will be sorted into a house," Dumbledore said. "It will be only Naruto and Gaara though. I'm sorry, Kakashi, but you are too old for our program. You may, however, study in the library, practice skills on your own, attend classes alongside them, or anything else that will be suitable. Until you are sorted, we have some beds available in the hospital wing. I'm sorry to say that we normally don't have guests here at Hogwarts," Dumbledore apologized, "but once the two of you are sorted we will have arrangements made for all of you." At the infirmary, Dumbledore pointed to a dish on one of the trays. "This will keep refilling itself with sandwiches until you are full. This is pumpkin juice," he said, pointing to a jug that sat next to 3 silver goblets, "and I dare say it is a favorite among students. Good night." Silently, the 3 ninja ate their full of sandwiches, Naruto eating the most despite the fact that he complained about there not being any ramen, and Kakashi and Naruto settled down peacefully on their own cots. Gaara sighed and sat down on another, fiddling around with the small amount of sand he now possessed. There were times when he really hated not being able to sleep. Chapter 3: Making New Friends. The Great Hall was unnaturally quiet the next morning, due in part to the fact that the foreigners were standing in front of the teacher's table. Many students were disappointed to notice that the 2 younger ones were not wearing the strange apparel they had heard about. Naruto abandoned the orange jumpsuit, opting instead for the gray shirt he wore underneath and some baggy jeans, with black robes loosely covering his person, and his necklace from Tsunade proudly gleaming in the candlelight. Gaara wore a maroon shirt with brown khakis underneath his robes. Kakashi wore no robes and did not alter his appearance. He felt they were too bulky and restricted his movement. Naruto had his hands behind his head, seemingly bored as he squinted at the other students, as if sizing them up. Gaara had his arms crossed, examining the students with a penetrating glare that made many under his gaze uncomfortable. Kakashi merely smiled at the students and gave an offhand wave to a young Hufflepuff who was staring at him. She blushed and looked away quickly. "Good morning to you all," Dumbledore began, raising his hands in a greeting. "As you have probably already heard, through an extremely unforeseeable turn of events, we have 3 visitors who will be staying with us for an unknown amount of time. Their names are Kakashi, Naruto, and Gaara, he said, pointing to each in turn. I trust that you all will do your part to make them feel welcome. Dumbledore clapped his hands, signaling everyone else to do the same. Now, if you would sit here, please. Naruto followed his gaze to the wooden stool and sat cautiously, meeting everyone's stares with a determined look. Professor McGonagall had barely placed the sorting hat on his head before it bellowed, Gryffindor. Which was met with somewhat enthused clapping from the Gryffindor students. Naruto joined them after casting a rather wistful glance back at Gaara, and then sat next to the brown-haired girl he had talked to upon their arrival. Remaining ignorant of the stares due undoubtedly to his headband and unique hairstyle, Naruto calmly waited for Gaara to finish. Gaara sat down with his arms crossed, and met everyone's gazes with such a penetrating stare many had to look away. As soon as the hat was placed on his head, it began whispering to him in his head, almost causing the boy to jump in surprise. Plenty of talent concerned only for yourself, no bonds, loneliness. No! Gaara thought furiously as panic started to seep in. I used to, but not anymore. I'm trying to change. Don't separate me from Naruto, he ordered. He was still a bit new at this whole friendship thing, but he knew that he definitely wanted to be with Naruto. Are you sure? Slytherin would work out best. Wait, I see it now. Old desires replaced a desire to protect, a desire to help others. Gryffindor. Gaara breathed a small sigh of relief. He wasn't sure about what Slytherin was like, but if it was for people like who he was before, he wanted nothing to do with them. All that mattered was that he was with Naruto. McGonagall was shocked. Judging by her first feelings for the boy, she was positive that he would be added to Slytherin, and it appeared that many others shared her feelings as well. These newcomers were apparently not what they originally seemed. Naruto immediately broke into a grin as Gaara sat down next to him, giving him a good thump on the back. Upon noticing at least one of the newcomers was capable of normal human expressions, the tension soon dissipated and people slowly chatted amongst themselves again. In the midst of this, Kakashi found himself in a very awkward situation. Where was he going to sit? To his relief, Hagrid called his name quietly and gestured to an open seat beside him, beckoning him to sit. Kakashi nodded slightly, and muttered a thank you as he sat down. He then gave a bit of a skeptical glance towards the sorting hat as McGonagall put it off to the side. Judging by the way Gaara reacted, it appeared that the hat was able to speak into the mind of the person upon whose head it sat. Then it somehow was able to judge a person's character, and then place them in the appropriate house. The Jounin suddenly found himself grateful that he wasn't to be sorted, because there was no way he'd be sorted anywhere but Slytherin. And from what he had seen from the way the students in that house acted and the way everyone else regarded them, he would end up hard-pressed to gain the trust of anyone else. Yes. Now, without further ado, let's eat. Everyone's fascination with the newcomers vanished as the highly anticipated food magically appeared in front of them. Naruto squealed in pleasure at the abundance of food and put as much on his plate as he could. Even Gaara's eyes widened slightly at the wide assortment of dishes, where every food imaginable seemed to appear, with some he didn't even recognize. As people began to devour the mountain of nourishment on their plates, many stole curious glances at Kakashi, eager to witness the unveiling of his face. Sensing their eyes on him, Kakashi peered up, causing many to look away quickly. He sighed. He really hated eating this way, but he figured it came with wearing the mask. It'll be fun to mess with them, anyway, he figured, trying to convince himself. There was always a sort of satisfaction he gained by squandering Naruto's hopes of seeing his face, just like it had with Obito. And sure enough, Kakashi spotted Naruto attempting to appear sly in hopes of watching him eat. With a concealed smirk, Kakashi dramatically lowered his mask half an inch, and then after everyone blinked, the food was gone. Kakashi leaned back in his chair smugly, becoming the topic of conversation for most of breakfast. Having filled his plate, Naruto leaned over and whispered to Gaara, "Where are the chopsticks?" Gaara frowned and picked up the 2 metal devices and examined them curiously, holding them up to the light. Then he stared at the people around them and answered, "I think these wizards use these things." Naruto cocked an eyebrow and joined Gaara in attempting to use the strange utensils, not noticing the stares from 3 students. "We didn't get to be properly introduced before," the brown-haired girl said, sticking out her hand to Naruto. "My name is Hermione Granger." Naruto turned to her, his mouth full of food, then quickly swallowed it in one gulp and grinned. "Uzumaki Naruto," he bellowed happily. He gave her a small bow before returning to his meal. Hermione was too stunned at his actions that her hand stayed frozen where it was, and Naruto turned back around to her. He squinted at the hand as if he expected something to happen. "Did you hurt your hand?" The girl blinked and answered cautiously. You're supposed to shake it." "Oh, okay." Then he gripped her fingers and shook her hand so hard that her whole body moved along. Seemingly pleased with his performance, he held out his hand to Gaara. "This is fun. Come on, Gaara." The redhead gave him a glare that said there is no way in hell I am ever going to do that before returning to his meal. Slightly put out, Naruto shrugged and attempted to use the pointed utensil to eat his mashed potatoes. "Hey," he whispered at the dark-haired boy with glasses in front of him. "How do you use these?" Harry was momentarily stunned as he sat there gaping at Naruto with a drumstick halfway to his mouth. "Like this." Then he demonstrated for the shinobi with an awkward smile. "These guys are weird," he thought. "Oh, okay. What are your names?" Naruto's voice reminded Harry of Colin Creevey, yet with a Japanese accent and much, much louder. "Harry Potter, and this is Ron Weasley," he added, pointing to a redhead next to him who was currently stuffing his face with sausages. "Well, hello Granger-san, Potter-san, and Weasley-san." At Harry and Ron's looks of confusion at being called by their last name by a fellow student, Hermione quickly explained, "Naruto, here at Hogwarts, we say our family name last. And you don't have to be so formal with us," she added as an afterthought. "Oh. Well, sorry, Hermione, Harry, and Ron. This is Gaara, and he's really nice once you get to know him," he assured them when he noticed they glanced at him with trepidation. Gaara turned to the blonde with a frown, not understanding his friend's remark, then shrugged it off and returned to his meal, deciding it wasn't worth fretting about. "So, where are you from?" Ram asked between helpings of sausage. "The villages hidden in the leaves and hidden in the sand, or Konoha and Suna," Naruto informed them, pointing to each in turn. Harry fought the urge not to laugh at the odd images that came to mind. "Why is it a hidden village?" he asked instead. "It's not hidden like you think," Naruto said. "It just shows that we are a shinobi village for our country." "You are from different countries?" Harry asked. "How did Neville bring you both here then?" Naruto frowned in confusion for a second, then explained, "Oh, he was in Konoha Hospital with me because we were injured in the battle with the Shin ship." He struggled to remember the name, "people who kidnapped Matsuri." "Matsuri? Kidnapped?" Gaara slowly nodded. "She's my apprentice," he explained, speaking for the first time. His voice was rather raspy and thick in a Japanese accent. Wait, Hermione said quickly, holding her hand up. "Just how old are you guys?" 13. "And you have an apprentice? And were involved in a battle that sent you to the hospital?" Ron asked, his mouth hanging open. The two strangers slowly nodded, not understanding what was so incredible. "We've been involved in many missions," Naruto explained, with some being really dangerous and exciting. "Once I slept for 3 days straight afterwards because I was so tired." Hermione looked like she was about to protest, but it was time for their first class. Harry glanced over to Naruto and Gaara who were reading their class schedule, which had been translated into kanji. "What's divination?" Ron snorted. "The most useless class run by an old bat in spectacles," he explained, provoking laughter from Harry and Hermione. Naruto opened his mouth in amazement. "They let animals teach here? Wow, if Kiba were here he'd probably have Akamaru teach," he added in an undertone to himself. No, she's not really a bat," Harry said frantically. "That's just what she looks like. Ron and I also have that class, so we'll show you where it is." The two shinobi thought they were going to die. The stench of perfume was so overpowering it practically sent them to their knees when they first entered as the scent washed over them. Being shinobi, their sense of smell was extremely heightened, so this was akin to torture. Sit down," a misty voice said. Naruto decided Ron's description of Trelawney was correct. She did look like a bat with huge glasses on. "So, these are the newcomers? It was shown to me that they would come, of course," she pronounced dramatically as she glided over to them. "Now, what are your names, dear boys?" If she saw they would come, how can she not know their names? Ron whispered to Harry. "Mr. Weasley." Her usual misty voice was now high and shrill. "Those gifted with the inner eye do not bother themselves with trivial pursuits such as names. We focus on the events of what is to happen. Now," her voice became misty again, "your names, please?" Once they had been properly introduced, the lesson proceeded. "Now I want you to take turns telling each other about your dreams, while the other interprets them using Unfogging the Future as a reference." Gaara mentally groaned. He never dreamed. So he ended up being forced to listen to Naruto ramble on and on about dreams of eating ramen with Sakura, finding Sasuke, and becoming Hokage the whole class period. Towards the end of class, Trelawney appeared beside him unexpectedly. What have you determined from your dreams? Gaara shrugged. I don't have dreams. Trelawney shook her head sadly. My dear, everyone has dreams. Sometimes we just don't remember them. Try harder, and you shall remember at least one. Naruto snorted, bringing half the class's attention over to them. Gaara just stared back at the woman with a deadpan expression. I don't have dreams, because I don't sleep. Ever. People began whispering among themselves about the interesting news. The professor was confused. Dear boy, I would ask that you stop messing around, she said. Tell me one of your dreams. Gaara sighed. I have never slept a day in my life. I never dream, I can't do this assignment. Naruto nodded in agreement, chuckling softly to himself at the look on the old lady's face. Young man, I will not tolerate this foolishness. If you don't tell me a dream, then I will be forced to take drastic measures. Gaara was beginning to get a headache from her yelling, coupled with the highly scented perfumes that were interfering with his ability to think properly. He could feel Shikaka moving within him restlessly. As I said before, I don't sleep. If you are so gifted at what you call inner eye, then you should know that I'm telling the truth, as well as the reason why I do not sleep. Can you tell me that? Everyone was shocked at his blatant defiance. Ron silently raised a fist in excitement beneath his table, provoking a smirk from Harry. I am well. I can see that you have nothing to teach me, which means I cannot waste my time here. With that said, the reserved ninja stood up and left the classroom. It was like Hermione all over again. Once his footsteps could no longer be heard descending the spiral staircase, Trelawney faced her students. Well, everyone returned to the activity until class is over. Then she walked away to the center of the room, mumbling something about disrespectful foreigners. That evening, after dinner, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Naruto, and Gaara were in the common room. Hermione was curled up comfortably in her favorite chair, while Harry and Naruto discussed Trelawney's homework. Naruto was making up dreams for both of them while Harry wrote them down. Ron was teaching Gaara wizard's chess, because the shinobi had been intrigued by how the pieces moved when you told them to. Kakashi was examining a bookshelf in the far corner of the room. So, what are these missions like that you go on? Ron asked. Oh please, Ron, Hermione snapped over her ancient runes book. There is no way a bunch of 13-year-olds could be involved in any sort of battle that will endanger their lives. They're just making it up. Gaara sent her a small scowl from where he sat, and the next thing Hermione knew, her book was wrenched out of her hands and brought over to Gaara by a pile of levitating sand. After allowing a few seconds of surprise, Gaara raised a non-existent eyebrow and mocked, making it up. Naruto laughed at the expression on the witch's face. Wicked! Ron whistled. What else can you do? Harry asked, inching closer and abandoning his homework. Gaara simply shrugged. I'll need more sand. Naruto piped up, I can make shadow clones. The trio was confused. You can make different shadows of yourself? Ron wondered aloud. Naruto shook his head, appalled by their lack of knowledge. No, I can make actual clones of myself, solid ones, and that is very advanced. There was no doubt that he was exceptionally proud of this. Hermione sighed as if talking to a child. Naruto, there is no possible way you could clone yourself. It's scientifically impossible. The process takes years, beginning by isolating a nucleus from a somatic cell of an adult donor, and then inserting it into Kaigebunshin no Jutsu. Suddenly there was a large cloud of smoke that surrounded him, and when it cleared away, there were 4 Narutos grinning at her. A shadow of a smirk settled on Gaara's face while the 3 friends stared at the clones in amazement. Told you I could, for Naruto said at once. Hermione just stood there stuttering. Ron shook his head and slapped one of the Narutos on the back. That was wicked! He glanced at Hermione. Looks like the laws of science failed you. Harry agreed, yet he was amazed Hermione didn't notice already that the normal laws of science didn't necessarily apply to even wizards. Naruto sniggered and put his hands behind his head while his clones disappeared in a cloud of smoke with a small popping sound. So, you really were telling the truth, Hermione said slowly. Naruto rolled his eyes. Of course. What's a typical mission like? Hermione asked in spite of herself. And so, the next half hour or so was spent discussing the different mission classifications, who they were handed out to, and what typically happened on each assignment. Once the wizards had achieved a more thorough understanding about the shinobi world, Hermione muttered, how could they force little kids to do that? Naruto frowned. What do you mean by that? What do you mean? You go into this academy when you're 5 to learn how to be a ninja and taught how to kill other human beings. What kind of a society do you live in? Hermione was apparently very distraught, and Harry and Ron hadn't seen her this worked up since she learned about the enslaving of house elves. How dare you make fun of my village? Naruto shouted. Gaara also seemed slightly perturbed. If we didn't learn how to fight, then we wouldn't be able to protect our village from other villages or those who want to attack us. Yeah, what he said. Also, becoming a ninja is really tough. We need to start early, so we can also replace the older shinobi who die from their missions, which is a great honor to die in battle for your village. But Hermione could see the ninja didn't understand her argument. 12 and 13-year-olds shouldn't have to risk their lives like that. Sending them into battles that could kill them? You should at least wait until you're older. That's nothing, Naruto said. My sensei Kakashi was involved in one of the greatest shinobi wars, and he was just a little older than us. The three sat in astonishment, unable to comprehend it. Harry glanced over to the man who was inspecting books in the far right corner. He was in a war at such a young age and survived? He's a genius, and was made a chunin at 6, which takes most genin years to become. Naruto leaned in closer and whispered, in that war, he somehow got his Sharingan in his left eye, yet no one knows how he got it. What's a Sharingan? A bloodline limit, which is why it's so mysterious. Only the Uchiha clan has it. The wizards were confused as to why a certain clan had whatever this Sharingan was, but they didn't really have the patience to sit through another lecture. So, why does he cover his mouth with that mask? Ron asked instead. Naruto sighed in frustration. No one knows. I've been trying for years to find out, but none of my plans ever work. He dropped his voice to a dramatic whisper. I think it's because he has fat girly lips or big buck teeth. Buck teeth? Who could you be possibly talking about, Naruto? The startled boy yelped in surprise and fell to the ground. Ron gasped. He had been watching Kakashi while they were talking to make sure he wasn't listening to them, but 1 second he was on the opposite side of the room, and the next he was whispering in Naruto's ear. And nothing, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto stammered. Kakashi smirked. Mr. Hataki? At the mention of his family name, Kakashi seemed to freeze for a brief second, his back rigid, and his hands clenched. Then he regained his composure and said in a slightly nervous voice as he rubbed the back of his neck, that was my father. You can call me Kakashi. Okay. Well, what exactly is a Sharingan? Naruto said you had one? Kakashi frowned as Ron, Harry, Hermione, and even Gaara seemed to lean forward in anticipation. The Suna boy had always heard of the stories surrounding the famous copy ninja and his Sharingan, but it was said only his comrades and those he killed had ever seen it. Tell you what, he decided, one of you cast a spell and then I'll copy it with my Sharingan. Sure. Harry took out his wand and thought of a spell to use. But what did he mean by copy? Oh well. He'd find out soon enough. The spell had to be relatively easy, because Kakashi had never done magic before. Kakashi lifted his left hand and unveiled the Sharingan. Everyone gasped as they noticed the red pupil with a strange design. It looked like a mutant form of pink eye to Harry. He gulped, not liking being looked at by the red eye. How about this one? He pointed at one of his books and chanted, Wingardium Leviosa, to which the book rose obediently into the air. Naruto was impressed. Then Kakashi withdrew his wand and copied Harry's movements exactly. Wingardium Leviosa. Everyone gasped as the book he was pointing to rose up so fast and high that it hit the ceiling and cracked it. Harry stared at Kakashi in amazement. He got it right on his first try, and it was so powerful. Kakashi appeared very intrigued. So, it seems that just copying the movements is not enough. He brought the book down and tried again, this time bringing it up to the same level as Harry's. Satisfied, he turned to Naruto and Gaara. Okay, it appears that once you get the wrist movement down, you have to control the amount of chakra that you put into the wand. It's just like our jutsu, because it requires a precise amount of chakra to do certain commands. If there is not enough, nothing happens, and if there is too much, then it goes out of control. Do you understand? Yes, Naruto said. Gaara just nodded thoughtfully. Harry and Ron were aghast at this. The way they learned spells was by putting whatever amount of energy they felt like, and it was only after hours of practice that they instinctively put the amount of energy they needed to complete the spell. Hermione was simply amazed. I thought I was the only one who learned magic that way. And that took me a couple weeks to figure it out. Kakashi truly is a genius. Kakashi pocketed his wand and then surveyed the common room. Well, it appears that it's time to go to bed. Naruto and Gaara follow me. Dumbledore-sama told me where our room is. As the two followed the silver-haired man, Harry leaned to Hermione. Why did he call the headmaster Dumbledore-sama? In their society, it's a way of showing respect for someone who is very powerful or high-ranking, she explained as they gathered up their homework. Wow! These beds are huge! Naruto exclaimed as he jumped up and down on his four-poster bed. And they've got curtains! Idiot! Keep it down, people are sleeping, Gaara said. He had to admit that they were very nicely furnished, better than the ones they had at the Kazekage mansion. And these were for mere students. Okay, Naruto. That's enough, Kakashi said as he took off his jounin jacket. Just go to bed. The blonde grinned and quickly changed into the pajamas that used to be laid across the bed, but were now in a heap on the floor. As soon as he curled up under the warm blankets, he fell asleep. Gaara watched him and the copy Nin fall into a peaceful slumber before mentally groaning and walked back downstairs to the common room. What he didn't notice was Kakashi watching him leave the room. I wish there was something I could do for him. Meanwhile, Harry and Ron were quietly settling into their beds to the sound of Neville's snores. Hey, Harry? Ron whispered. What? Do you really think that Gaara kid doesn't sleep, or was he just angry at Trelawney? Harry shrugged. I don't know. How could someone never be able to sleep their entire life? Why don't we see? Harry frowned. What if he's in their room? Ron thought for a moment. Well, if I could never sleep, I wouldn't want to be around people who could. You got a point. Let's use my cloak, just in case he might see us. The two friends tiptoed down the stairs underneath the cloak and noticed Gaara sitting next to the fire with Crookshanks on his lap, his chin resting on his fist as if he were bored, and not looking sleepy at all. He looked to be in a trance, just staring at the fire as he absent-mindedly stroked the cat, who was enjoying this very much. Ron smirked. Didn't think he'd be the cat type, huh? He whispered to Harry. I know you're there, Harry and Ron, Gaara announced, not even looking in their direction. They were speechless. Harry wrenched the cloak off. How could you know it was us? We were completely invisible, he protested, making sure to keep his voice at an appropriate level. Yeah, and we were really quiet, Ron added. Gaara sighed and turned his attention towards them. I don't need to see you. I could sense your presence, and I have already interpreted your signature chakra or magic as you call it. And actually, you were rather loud. I could hear each of your footsteps. If you want to sneak up on someone, you should be more graceful. Needless to say, they were impressed. So this is what they teach ya, huh? Wish I could do that, Ron said. He began envisioning being able to use the skill to sneak up on his older brothers. Anyway, Harry said, we just wanted to see If what I said in divination was true? Harry and Ron hesitantly nodded, suddenly feeling foolish and awkward. They hadn't necessarily planned on Gaara actually noticing them. It is. I've never slept, and I most likely never will. His eyes seemed full of sorrow for a split second, so brief that the two wizards felt like they must have imagined it. Anyhow, they found they had a better understanding of the meaning behind the black circles around Gaara's eyes. The shinobi turned away from them and resumed staring at the fire and stroking Crookshanks. See you tomorrow. Ron and Harry took that as a signal to go to bed, which they did quickly. Good night, Gaara, they called over their shoulder. Gaara's hand froze for a second. Hardly anyone ever bothered to say that to him. Why were they being so kind? Chapter 4, Unforgivable Curses. The next morning, the five who slept met Gaara downstairs for breakfast. Throughout the entire meal, Ron was talking nonstop about how excited he was for Moody's class. Fred and George say he's really something. They say he does stuff that no other teacher has done before, he said as they tried to eat their meal in peace. We'll probably learn stuff that only an Aura knows. What's an Aura? Naruto asked. They are elite wizards who capture dark wizards and bring them to be judged and sent to Azkaban, the wizard prison, Harry said. Oh. We've got something like that too, only we call them ANBUN. Maybe we'll learn something cool enough to use against Malfoy, Ron continued, too caught up in his excitement to hear. The blonde stuck out his lower lip and pouted as he finished his meal. I don't think he seems like a big deal, he thought. They take the dark wizards and bring them to a court of some sort, and then they're sent to jail. The ANBU track them down and kill them except for special cases. These wizards are too soft. And so it was with skepticism that Naruto entered the Dada classroom with his four friends. Everyone was eerily quiet and seemed as excited as Ron for their teacher to arrive. When he thought he couldn't bear the silence anymore, the strange wizard entered the room with his wooden leg clanking against the floor and his mechanical eye swirling. Naruto cringed slightly. He had to hand it to the wizard, that eye of his was creepy, even creepier than the Sharingan and the Byakugan. The crippled wizard began by taking roll, naming off animals that they had previously learned about, all of which Naruto had never heard of before, and then about curses. The blonde was inclined to believe that this aura was a little too fond of curses by the way he described how dangerous and powerful they were. There was an edge of awe and almost gentle caress in his voice. Completely bored, Naruto took out his wand and began playing with it, tuning out the weird professor. It was a skill he honed after many lessons in the academy with Irika-sensei. To be alert and watchful. You need to put away your wand when I'm talking, Mr. Uzumaki. At the mention of his name, Naruto jumped slightly in his chair and dropped the wand. Apparently, the mechanical eye could see through solid objects just like the Byakugan could. As Ron named one of the unforgivable curses, Naruto decided it was in his best interest to pay attention. He watched as Moody withdrew a glass jar with 3 spiders inside and held one in the palm of his hand. For some reason, Ron slid back into his seat as far as he could. Imperio! The whole class laughed as the spider performed a series of acrobatic moves, but Moody did not. Think it's funny, do you? He growled. You'd like it, would you, if I did it to you? Everyone shut up. Total control, Moody said softly as he made the spider roll around on the desk. I could make it jump out of the window, drown itself, throw itself down one of your throats. Both shinobi shuddered. They had way too much experience with being forced to do things by an outside, or rather, inside force. Naruto decided that he didn't like that curse very much. The Imperio's curse can be fought, and I'll be teaching you how, but it takes real strength of character, and not everyone's got it. Better avoid being hit with it if you can. Constant vigilance, he barked, causing everyone to jump. Naruto turned to Gaara and gave him a grim smirk that didn't reach his eyes, as if saying, well, we already know how to do that. Gaara gave a small nod to show he understood and focused his attention back to the discussion just in time to hear the boy that summoned him there say, there's one, the Cruciatus curse. Your name's Longbottom? The boy nodded nervously and Moody got a strange look in his eye, but didn't say anything else. He grabbed a different spider and enlarged it. Crucio. The spider immediately began to contort in obvious pain. Without meaning to, Gaara gripped the side of the desk he was sitting at so hard that his knuckles were white, and he grit his teeth. The spider reminded him of all the lonely nights he spent wrestling with the demon within him, crying out and rolling on the ground in uncontrollable pain. Naruto noticed his friend's distress and was about to tell the professor to stop when Hermione beat him to it. Stop it! Can't you see it's bothering him? For an instant Naruto thought she was referring to Gaara, but he followed her gaze and noticed it was Neville she was glancing at, who looked exactly like his shinobi friend. Mad-Eye broke off the curse and put away the spider slowly. Pain, he said. You don't need thumbscrews or knives to torture someone if you can perform the Cruciatus curse. Or know how to merge an innocent child with a demon, Gaara thought dryly, unable to stop himself. The professor called on Hermione to pronounce the final curse. Avada Kedavra, she whispered. Ah, yes. The last and worst, the killing curse. As the two shinobi looked up in alarm, Moody procured the final spider and pointed his wand at it. Avada Kedavra! There was a blinding flash of green light and a rushing sound similar to the sound of wings. Naruto fearfully glanced at the spider, which was on its back unmoving. He shifted his gaze to Gaara and wondered if his ultimate defense could hold up against something like that. In fact, he wondered if the sand defense would hold up against any curse, seeing as how they weren't necessarily solid objects, just beams of energy. Turning to the spider, Naruto couldn't help but feel that the killing curse wasn't all that bad. There was no blood, no mess, no suffering on the victim's part. They just died. However, it was eerie how something as simple as that could kill a person. The blonde was grateful no one knew that curse in his world, because it really wasn't a cool way to die. Sure, a person dying was no laughing matter, but Naruto had sometimes envisioned himself dying in an epic battle while protecting his precious people. And there's no counter curse. There's no blocking it. Only one known person has ever survived it, and he's sitting right in front of me. The two shinobi snapped their attention to Harry, who instantly became incredibly uncomfortable. He survived that curse? Naruto thought in wonder. What does he have inside of him that protects him? Does he have a demon like us? Naruto decided he would have to ask Harry about it later. They took notes the rest of the period. Later on that day they were in the common room, doing their homework. Naruto was just about to ask Harry about what happened in Dada, when Hermione came down the stairs and announced she was finished with something. When asked what it was, she proclaimed that it was about spew. What's it for? Naruto asked. to protect house elf rights and. What's a house elf? Hermione stared at him in amazement. They are magical creatures who are unfairly and unjustly used to work for wizards. This club will work to secure house elves' wages and working conditions and maybe even set some free, she said with an excited gleam in her eye. Gar frowned and looked at Ron, who shook his head frantically, pointed to Hermione, and mouthed, "No." Naruto, however, did not see Ron, and happily shouted, "I want to join." Hermione beamed at him approvingly and began furiously discussing how they could achieve their goals while Naruto just nodded along and smiled. He didn't really understand what was going on, but if it meant helping others, he was all for it. Suddenly the three wizards' attention was focused on some bird that appeared at the window, and they abandoned the two shinobi, opting to go over and talk in whispers about someone who was serious. Just then Kakashi entered the common room and sat down on the couch next to Gaara, his clothes dirty and it appeared as if his sleeves were slightly singed. "Where have you been, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto scolded. The Jounin yawned lazily. "Scouting out the grounds of this castle. I ran into Hagrid, and he invited me over to his house. Apparently he is a teacher here and he is in charge of a class called Care of Magical Creatures." "We have that class tomorrow," Gaara recalled. Kakashi nodded. "I asked to see what kind of creatures he took care of, and he told me all about them." He said this with a hint of excitement, and Naruto understood why. His sensei always had a soft spot for animals, seeing as how he had a whole ninja dog squad, and he undoubtedly missed them. Naruto recalled what they had discussed last night after Gaara had left. "Kakashi-sensei," Naruto whispered, sitting up in his bed. The Jounin sighed. "What is it, Naruto? Couldn't you summon Pakin or something so he could tell Bachan where we are? Or I could summon Gamakichi." Kakashi smiled. "I'm proud of you for using your head, Naruto, but I've already thought about that, and it is probably best that we don't." At his student's bewildered expression he explained, "I have no idea where we are. That boy may have summoned us to another dimension or across time. Summoning Pakin might work, but it could put him in danger, and he might be lost forever in some dimensional vortex." Naruto couldn't help but notice his sensei said this sadly. "Dumbledore-sama promised that he would find a way back, and I can tell that he is a trustworthy person. We'll just have to wait." Slightly dejected, Naruto nodded his understanding and went to bed. "The creatures here are amazing, and you will get to see some very interesting ones tomorrow." Judging by his clothes, Naruto guessed that the animal could breathe fire. "I've also found a perfect place to practice sparring," the Jounin continued. "Really? Where?" Naruto was intrigued by this new world, but he wasn't about to get rusty. After all, he was going to become Hokage one day. "It's this forest right outside the grounds and by Hagrid's house." That night Gaara sat down in his favorite chair, only to be joined by Crookshanks a few minutes later. He was glad for the company, because he felt even lonelier at night than he ever felt before. He didn't have his siblings nearby, or his sand, and he was in a completely new place that he didn't know much about. Of course, having his best, and only, friend, Naruto, there with him made it easier. It was nice to be around a person that understood how he felt, and what he's gone through. Having the Jounin Kakashi was helpful as well, but Gaara really didn't know him that much. He didn't have the same bond that existed between Kakashi and Naruto, which was almost like a fatherly relationship. Or at least, what Gaara thought a father-son relationship was supposed to be. He didn't really have much experience in that matter. He and Baki were getting along better now, his sensei not having to worry that he'd explode and go on a killing rampage whenever he felt like it anymore. Still, it just wasn't the same. "Yo!" Gaara spun around so fast that Crookshanks fell from his lap onto the floor. The cat hissed at him and bounded away with its shaggy tail held high. The Jounin Kakashi was standing by the couch, his hand up in a greeting. Gaara noted with awe that he wasn't able to detect his presence, which was saying something. Gaara had become very adept at sensing people so he could stop assassination attempts before they really even started. He supposed this Jounin wasn't known as one of Konoha's finest for nothing. "How are you?" Kakashi asked. Gaara just shrugged, not really one for words. The Jounin smiled. "Today I learned a new spell, one that I think you'd be interested in knowing." When he was assured he had Gaara's full attention, Kakashi pointed at the floor in front of Gaara and chanted Aranis. Gaara's eyes widened in amazement as a pile of sand appeared in front of him, just like Dumbledore had done. When it was about a foot high, Kakashi ceased the spell. "Would you like to learn it? I think it would be useful if you ever needed more." Gaara nodded, and the next 15 minutes was spent learning how to complete the spell, and by the end he had produced an ample amount of sand. "Now," Kakashi began, "I think that carrying around a gourd might stand out a little too much in this world, and using too much sand for your armor would drain you of your chakra, so I've invented a the man had in store. A few minutes later, Kakashi had successfully sewn pockets with magic on the inside of Gaara's robes, and then used a long string of wizard words on each one once they were finished. Now all you need to do, he said, is put as much sand into these pockets as you want. The pockets will barely grow in size, and it won't add any extra weight. The last spell I used was an undetectable extension charm. It was a little tricky, but I think I got it down. Gaara could only stare. Kakashi undoubtedly had to research about all 3 previous spells and then practice them. The Jounin was truly amazing to be able to perform those spells on their 3rd day there. Thank you, he said awkwardly. That was the correct response, right? No one had ever given Gaara a present or done something like this before. He had no idea what to do in return. Should he give him a present? A hug? What should he do? As he stood there, struggling to find a way to show his gratitude, Kakashi just smiled and put his hand on Gaara's head, ruffling up his hair a little. I'll leave you to mold your chakra into the sand, he said, handing over the robe before going upstairs. A smile tugged at the corners of Kakashi's concealed mouth. He knew Gaara appreciated what he did for him. The kid just didn't know what to do with kindness. The fact that Gaara didn't even know how to really respond to a gift like that was heartbreaking, and Kakashi cursed the existence of demons like he did all those years ago in that fateful battle. He wished he could take them away from all the poor Jinchuriki. Though he acted oblivious and disinterested, Kakashi could see the pain that was in Naruto's eyes every day when he trained him, and that pain was evident in Gaara's eyes as well. The best he could do was try to make their lives a little easier and make them happy. Gaara just couldn't believe how well the spell worked. He had just spent the last hour or so molding his chakra with the sand. He'd take a break every so often to regain the chakra he lost, then conjure up some more sand using the first spell he learned from Kakashi, and finally filled the pockets with as much sand as was in his gourd and then some. The pockets were a little bulkier, but not much, and Gaara didn't feel the weight of the sand at all, allowing him to move freely. As he sat down again in the armchair to rest, Gaara felt more at peace. He now was fully armed with sand in case anything happened, and for some reason, his chest felt lighter. He couldn't really explain it more than that. Pleased with this new feeling, Gaara resumed staring into the fire, twiddling his wand as he did so and waited for morning to come. The next day around lunchtime, the Gryffindors gathered outside near Hagrid's hut where they would, unfortunately, be joined by the Slytherins. Hagrid was standing next to a bunch of wooden crates which were rattling in a rather odd way. Kakashi was on the other side of the large man, scratching Fang lazily behind the ears. "Mornin'," Hagrid said. "Kakashi has volunteered to help with the lesson today. We'll be workin' with blast-ended squirts." "Come again?" Ron asked as horrible visions of what they could be ran through his mind. Their professor pointed at the crates, and several people jumped backwards in disgust and fright after they caught a glance at them. Naruto and Gaara were the only ones who got closer. Naruto found them to be fascinating creatures, all pale and slimy-looking, with legs sticking out in random places, and appeared to be headless. When sparks erupted from one end of a scrut, causing it to be propelled several inches, Naruto laughed at them. "Ani just hatched," said Hagrid proudly, clearly pleased at Naruto's approval, "so you'll be able to raise them yourselves. Thought we'd make a bit of a project of it." "And why would we want to raise them?" said a cold voice. Everyone turned around to notice Malfoy and the other Slytherins approach. Naruto was instantly reminded of Sasuke, the same look on his face like he was better than everyone else, he noted with a twinge of sorrow. Maybe he could help this boy not end up like Sasuke. He could do that. "It'll be fun," Naruto proclaimed enthusiastically. The first step was to become friends. Draco looked at him with disgust, taking in all his eccentric features. "So, you're the newcomers?" he said, looking at each shinobi in turn. Naruto grinned and nodded. Malphus smirked. "Figures you'd be in Gryffindor. That's where all the freaks go." All the Gryffindors narrowed their eyes and Harry and Ron slowly inched their hands closer to their wands. Naruto, however, tried again, undeterred. "Everyone in Gryffindor is really nice. What's Slytherin like?" he asked, trying to be friendly. "What are you, some type of mutant cat?" Malfoy chided, ignoring the attempts at kindness. "What's with those marks on your face?" He glanced at all 3 of them in turn. "I knew you were weird, but I didn't realize how much. Perhaps you're just a potion experiment gone wrong, because there's no way." "Shut up." Naruto was fed up with trying to be his friend for the moment. Now Draco was going to pay. The shinobi dug his hand into the weapon pouch he had concealed inside his robe, using a spell Kakashi had taught him the night before, and was about to throw a couple kunai at the slime ball when his arm was surrounded in sand. He growled at Gaara, who shook his head. Pouting, he replaced the weapons and instead glared at Draco, whose eyes were wide in fright as he saw Gaara perform wandless magic, not even noticing the concealed weapons. "He's not worth it for now," Gaara said. As he summoned his sand around Naruto's arm back, the Gryffindors watched in amazement as the sand near Malfoy's feet untied his shoelaces and tied them together, which went unnoticed by the Slytherins who were too focused on the redhead. Harry and Ron suppressed a smirk. "Well," Malfoy began, but then quickly regained his composure. "Well, I'll have you know that my father is a very powerful person. If you harm me, you'll regret." At this point he attempted to walk forward but tripped over his shoelaces and fell flat on his face. The whole Gryffindor class erupted in laughter as Draco spat out dirt and rolled over onto his back. All the Slytherins were fussing over him and helping untie his shoelaces while the Gryffindors cracked up and began slapping Gaara on his back. It was all he could do to stop the sand from reaching out to protect him. Gaara had to keep telling himself that no, he wasn't being attacked, so there was no reason to kill or seriously injure the other students. That would probably not go over well with Dumbledore-sama, and Gaara rather preferred to keep his condition a secret. Unable to prove who did it, Malfoy spent the rest of the lesson giving the shinobi angry glares as they fed the strange creatures lettuce. They looked to be on good terms with Potter, Malfoy noted with glee. Now there were more people to torment. In the next defense against the dark arts, Mad Eye announced that he would be practicing the Imperious Curse on each of them in turn so they could learn how to resist it. Hermione instantly protested, but after being told to leave if she wanted to buy Moody, she declined the offer. One by one students had the Imperious Curse cast upon them and none were able to fight the curse, except for Harry, who half resisted, half complied, resulting in him crashing face first into the desk. Moody was delighted and proceeded to use it on him until he fought it completely, much to Harry's disappointment. When he was finished he limped over to Ron and Hermione. "Uzumaki, you're next." Naruto eagerly stepped towards Moody with his hands behind his head. "Imperio." "What now?" Naruto thought. "Show me some of your power, your strongest attack, everyone will respect you." "So this is the curse? Some stupid suggestion?" "Show it to me." When Naruto did nothing, a sharp jolt of pain coursed through his body and he winced. He had handled much worse though. The problem at hand though was to figure out what to do. Wait until Moody was done and realized his attempts were futile. No, he had something better in mind. The whole class was amazed at how calm Naruto was. In fact, he seemed to be enjoying himself, while Moody appeared to be having some difficulty with the curse. The shinobi yawned dramatically, then instantly appeared behind Mad Eye. Not as fast as Rock Lee or Kakashi, but fast enough so that the untrained wizard eyes could barely catch up. "Is that the best you can do?" Naruto taunted as he withdrew a kunai. Moody spun around, released the curse, and yelled, "Expelliarmus!" To the shinobi's surprise, the weapon was yanked out of his hand and landed a couple feet away. Everyone was silent for a moment, then began whispering at the impressive performance. "Very good, Naruto," Moody said, surprisingly cheerful. "You and Harry so far have been the only people able to resist the Imperial Curse." He turned to Gaara. "Your turn, kid." Gaara shook his head. He already had enough experience being told what to do by Shikaku, and he was doing his best to avoid situations like that from now on. "I decline from the exercise." Moody frowned at his for a second, then turned to Ron. "Your turn, Weasley." Ron cringed and waited for whatever Moody would do to him. "Imperio." However, at the last second, Mad Eye flicked his wrist in Gaara's direction, sending the curse towards him. Everyone held their breath in fear and anticipation as they waited to see how Gaara held up with the curse. His sand rose up in front of him, sensing danger. However, as soon as the beam of energy collided with his sand, it was pushed out of the way and Gaara flew backwards into a pile of desks, clearly not expecting it. Everyone gasped as the sand dropped to the floor, and the shinobi lay there motionless, not even breathing. "Give us a song," a sweet voice pleaded. "Just a small song, give us a song, we'd all like to hear one." Gaara got up and vaguely tried to remember a song to sing, but then he caught himself. "Why should I? Just a small song, give us a song." "Actually, I really don't want to," Gaara thought stubbornly. If that teacher thought he could make him do anything, then he was wrong. "What's this? Someone trying to tell me what to do?" "This is my body," Gaara sighed. "How many times do I have to tell you?" Shikaku didn't seem to hear him. "Let me out," he said sweetly. "Let me out, and this person will never bother you again." Gaara just rolled his eyes. "I'm not the weak little 12-year-old anymore. I don't have to listen to you. Sing. Now." Suddenly Gaara felt like he had a large headache, as if someone was pounding on his skull to force him to sing. However, Shikaka had given him worse headaches, so he didn't register it. The demon tried once more, but soon gave up, eager to give his container what was coming to him on the next full moon. Sing! Shut up! Gaara shouted, forcing his sand to charge toward Mad Eye, who quickly dropped the curse to protect himself. Protego! Gaara's sand collided with a shield of energy and spurted off in random directions before coming back to Gaara. He put the sand back in their appropriate places. The class was in shock as well as Moody, who still hadn't released his shield charm. Very good, he said before turning his attention to Ron and dropping the charm. Now it's really your turn, Weasley. As Gaara calmed down, he couldn't help but notice a shadow of a smirk on Mad Eye's face, as if he were pleased with what happened. He found himself puzzled by the strange reaction. What could it mean? Chapter 5: Pranks, Visitors, and Scars. It had been a while since the shinobi's arrival, and they had been formally accepted into Hogwarts. People enjoyed Naruto's kind and loud personality, as well as Gaara's contrasting aloof and silent attitude. Kakashi had also become a common sight in their care of magical creatures class and was always interested in learning new spells and finding out about the wizard world. He could be found reading various books from the library after he had learned how to read English fluently without the aid of a translation spell. Near the end of October, the whole school was in a buzz about the arrival of the students from Bosbatons and Durmstrang. Everyone had theories about how they would arrive, resulting in no one participating in their lessons, which ultimately led to the teachers giving up at trying to control them. Why are these people so important? Naruto asked. Everyone was outside the castle awaiting the arrival of the other schools. They're here for the Triwizard Tournament, my friend, George said, resting an elbow on the blonde's head. He and his twin had taken a special liking to the boy, mainly because he seemed to share their appreciation for pranks. Naruto's most notable prank had been on the potions master, Severus Snape. Don't worry, Naruto, Harry said. Naruto was still fuming about how he had been belittled and informed he was an overactive child who relied on making a fool of himself in an attempt to warrant attention by their least favorite teacher. Believe me, he does it to everyone. Naruto just growled. He can't say stuff like that about me. I'll make him regret it. Really? Fred asked, joining them at the table they were currently using to study. And how do you intend on doing that? George added. I don't know, but I will. George smirked in a way the other wizards only knew meant trouble. How about a prank then? I dare you to pull off a prank against Professor Snape in front of the whole school. Absolutely not. Hermione protested, shaking a finger at him. Don't listen to them, Naruto. There is no way you could pull a prank on Professor Snape and get away with it. Well, I guess if you're too chicken, I suppose you don't have to do it, Fred sighed dramatically, to which George imitated a chicken, flapping his bent arms behind him and clucked tauntingly. Naruto grinned. Just you watch, I'll go do it right now. I am not afraid of anything, he said, punching his fist into the air. Except ghosts, he added, barely above a whisper, yet Gaara heard. The redhead's lips quirked in a shadow of a smile as he remembered their first encounter with the Gryffindor ghost and returned to his homework. Naruto, Sto. Unfortunately for Hermione, he had already stood up and was mentally checking all the amazing pranks he had pulled in his last 13 years. Not surprisingly, there were enough ideas to fill a few books. Growing up completely by yourself could do that to you. After a brief minute of consideration, he grinned in a way oddly reminiscent of a fox and swung his legs over the bench, crouched down, and said quietly, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The Weasley twins and all who had never seen the jutsu before gasped in amazement at the clone who was crouched like he was. Naruto placed a hand on the clone's head and said, Henge. To which the clone transformed into an orange fox that wagged its tail playfully. Everyone watched with anticipation as Naruto pet the fox, and it playfully bit his hand. Now go, he whispered. The fox nodded and ran off, jumping from table to table, grinning at each student and allowing himself to be pet by some girls before scampering off. After a while, Snape looked up from his desk and noticed the fox running around and interrupting study hall. He angrily stormed over to the table where the fox was currently being cooed at by a group of first-year girls, and pointed his wand at it. However, before Snape could utter a spell, the fox grinned mischievously at him before disappearing. Startled, the potions master spun on his heels, only to discover the fox a few feet behind him, wagging its bushy tail innocently. Utterly perplexed, Severus shook his head as if to clear it, and aimed his wand again. The fox sprinted to the left, and soon the potions master was involved in a game of tag with the fox who was easily avoiding capture. The great hall rang with laughter as Snape tried to catch the fox that would get just close enough and then disappear in another location, playfully nipping at the man's feet. Suddenly it seemed as if Snape was having trouble moving, and the fox began running around the professor so fast it became an orange blur. Then the fox broke off. The potion's master swayed slightly, his arms locked firmly at his side as if there were invisible bonds holding them there. He tried to free himself frantically as students fell off the benches, overcome with laughter. The fox let out a loud yip and ran towards Severus. It jumped in the air a few feet in front of him and gracefully ran into his chest paws first, setting him off balance. There was a resounding thud as the reserve teacher fell on his rear. If it were possible, the laughter intensified, especially when the fox took a small bow and vacated the room. After a few minutes of struggling, Professor Snape freed himself from the bonds and discovered that they were extremely thin, yet sturdy wires that could only be seen when light reflected off them. In an effort to regain his dignity, he stood up and walked over to the table where Naruto and the rest were, and performed a quick flick of his wand. All the table's occupants' wands glowed and vibrated for a second before becoming lifeless again. Furious, he cleared his throat. "You are dismissed," he said as malevolently as he could before exiting himself. Once he was out of earshot, everyone turned to Hermione. "What did he do, Hermione?" Naruto demanded. "He was checking our wands to see who used a transformation spell against him. It's no question as to why he checked ours, but now that he has no evidence that any of us did it, Snape can't do anything except fail those he believes did it." Hermione sighed. She narrowed her eyes at Naruto. "You're lucky you can do wandless magic, or you would have been in big trouble." The blonde just grinned and placed his hands behind his head. He was soon harassed by Fred, George, Harry, Ron, and others about how amazing he was, and told that he just pulled the greatest prank ever. Gaara just shook his head in amazement. When Naruto's transformed clone bit his palm, it was really grabbing hold of some shinobi string. He had to admit, Naruto was, in some ways, a complete genius. After that incident, the twins had unofficially adopted Naruto as their apprentice, teaching him their ways and learning some of his own, to which the others were slightly fearful, especially Kakashi. From what he had heard about the Weasley twins from snippets of conversation he picked up here and there from other teachers, it wouldn't end well. The villagers had better watch out when they returned. "What's the Triwizard Tournament?" Gaara inquired with mild curiosity. "What? You don't know what it is?" Ron said. At Gaara's expression he grinned sheepishly. "Yeah, guess not." "Well, let me shed some light for you poor, misguided souls," Fred announced dramatically. "It's the most amazing event in school history. One person is chosen from each school who is considered worthy, and they compete in 3 tasks." He held up 3 fingers for emphasis, where the champion with the most points is the winner of the Triwizard Cup and 1,000 galleons prize. Sadly, George sighed, there's an age limit of 17, so yours truly and his partner in crime are unable to be selected. However, the most thrilling part of it is that people have died in this tournament. Fred added, intending to spook the shinobi. This is the first time it's been run in over a century, all because of the death toll. Instead of appearing impressed, each of the shinobi gave him a skeptical look. "They've had it cancelled for 100 years because of a death toll?" Gaara said with a hint of disappointment and disgust in his voice. "That's stupid," Naruto said. All surrounding wizards turned to face the shinobi, appalled at their response. "How can you say that?" Hermione said. "People dying is nothing to joke so lightly about." Naruto snorted. "If you asked me, this whole tournament seems stupid. An age limit of 17, and adjusting it so that you don't die. It's all rather ridiculous." "Oh yeah?" Seamus said. "Well, who says you have any right to say anything about it?" "Where we come from, we have an event similar to yours, with 3 tasks. However, this is a test held every 6 months for genin to become chunin, which is the 2nd rank for shinobi. It is a test of bravery, will, determination, and skill," Kakashi began, lifting his gaze from a wizard book. "And it's done in 3-person teams, and there is no age limit," Naruto added excitedly. "You could die at any time during the chunin exams if you aren't careful, and many have. But I didn't," he said proudly, puffing out his chest. "In fact, I beat the crap out of Niji in the final stage of the exam. He couldn't even move. And I would have become a chunin, if we weren't attacked." His gaze shifted over to Gaara nervously, who gave a small shrug. "You can retake the exam until you eventually reach the level of chunin," Gaara continued. "And yes, there are people who die. Each year about 1/5 of the people who try out die." "Well, there has to be an age limit," Seamus protested, stumbling for a counterargument. "If as many people die as you say, then it's not like they let toddlers participate, right?" "I don't know about toddlers, but whenever a genin is considered worthy enough, they are able to compete. Kakashi-sensei was just 6 when he completed his chunin exam, and he passed. Everyone's mouths dropped open and they all stared at the silver-haired Jounin to confirm the fact, which he did with a lazy nod of his head. Before anyone could say anything else on the matter, their attention was torn to the skies where a bunch of first-years were shrieking and pointing. Everyone gasped as the strange object was revealed to be a gigantic carriage pulled by flying horses, completely entranced by their beauty. When Madame Maxime stepped out of the carriage, the three shinobi were blown away by her size. They had thought Hagrid was big. She was as large as 3 Jiraiya's put together. Before they could recover from that shock, an enormous ship of the water, as large as one of the Hokage monumental heads. The Konoha shinobi had seen a fair amount of ships during their lifetime, but they had never seen one that size. Gaara was simply baffled. Living in Suna his whole life, he had never lived near a body of water, and consequently had never seen a ship before. It was very impressive, to say the least. A little while later, all the students eagerly took their seats in the grand hall, with Ron going ecstatic about Crumb and going on about Quidditch, to which Naruto expressed his desire to learn how to fly on a broomstick. "Sure, Naruto. I could teach you if you want," Harry said. To be honest, he was itching to fly on his firebolt. With the tournament being held this year, all Quidditch games had been cancelled, much to his chagrin. The team had been talking about having practices just to keep themselves in shape for the upcoming year. "When can we start?" Naruto started to bounce in his seat. Harry smiled at the blonde's enthusiasm. "Maybe tomorrow," he said. "If you want, I'll lend you some of my Quidditch books so you can read them." Naruto beamed and bounced even more, causing Gaara to put a firm grip on his shoulder. "Calm down, Naruto," he said. The boy nodded sheepishly and firmly sat down, waiting for Dumbledore to speak like everyone else. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and, most particularly, guests," he began, beaming at everyone. "I have great pleasure in welcoming you all to Hogwarts. I hope and trust that your stay here will be both comfortable and enjoyable." A beautiful girl off to their right at the other table snorted. "No one's making you stay," Hermione whispered. Naruto turned his attention to the girl Hermione was talking to and noticed another girl nearby who was the smallest from both batons. She sighed as if she were bored and then turned to Naruto. He flashed the girl his infamous smile, which she returned and waved to him happily. "The tournament will be officially opened at the end of the feast," Dumbledore continued. "I now invite you all to eat, drink, and make yourselves at home." Dinner ensued with talk about Vila, Bagman, Crouch, and Percy. Naruto noticed that Harry kept sneaking glances at a certain dark-haired girl who was seated next to the girl Ron was ogling over, and a sly grin appeared on his face. He knew what that look was. Once the feast was over, Dumbledore began the introductions. "Mr. Bagman and Mr. Crouch have worked tirelessly over the last few months on the arrangements for the Triwizard Tournament, and they will be joining myself, Professor Karkaroff, and Madame Maxime on the panel that will judge the champions' efforts," he explained. "And I'm pleased to announce that Kakashi Hatake has agreed to serve as security during the 3 tasks in case anything goes wrong to ensure that the contestants are safe." Many heads snapped towards the Jounin who was seated beside the gamekeeper, who gave a slight nod of confirmation. "Now, I think it is time for bed. Good night to you all." As soon as Dumbledore ceased speaking, the great hall erupted in excited chatter about who would enter their name in the goblet, who would try, and what the newcomers were like. As they approached the door, Naruto noticed the strange-looking man who arrived on the ship come at the same time, fussing over one of his students. Harry stopped and let him go first, and after muttering a quick thanks, the man frowned and faced Harry. Once his gaze rested upon his forehead, the man gasped and his students did the same, some even pointing at him. "Yeah, that's Harry Potter," Moody growled behind them, limping as he did so. For some reason his appearance made all the color fade from the man's face. "You!" Gaara could tell the man didn't care for Moody, and to be honest, he didn't either. He had never forgiven the professor for pulling that stunt against him in defense against the dark arts. If it wasn't so informative and intriguing, he would have quit the class like he did with divination. "Me mad," I said grimly. "And unless you've got anything to say to Potter Karkaroff, you might want to move. You're blocking the doorway." Karkaroff seemed to weigh his options, then made up his mind and stormed off with his students close behind him. Back in the common room, Naruto decided it was time to confront Harry about why he was treated differently than others. Harry? What did Moody mean by you being the only one to survive the killing curse?" Naruto bit his lip and glanced around the room before leaning in and whispering, "Do you have a demon inside you too?" Gaara found himself leaning in as well, eager to understand the meaning of his scar. Was it a mark of who he was, like Gaara's was of him? The 3 wizards stared at the shinobi with bewildered looks on their faces. They had been expecting questions about Harry's past, but to think he had a demon inside of him? No. I don't know anything about a demon, but there is a reason why I have this scar and survived that curse, Harry began. He sighed and then sat back against the couch. It was going to be a rather long story, so he might as well get comfortable. Besides, he predicted that it would be even longer than usual with Naruto interrupting all the time, which proved to be true. So, your mother sacrificed herself to save you? Naruto asked. Harry nodded. According to Dumbledore, it is her love that seemed to act as a shield against Voldemort. Ron winced, and he isn't able to touch me. Gaara frowned. Love? Why is it always love? This love they talk about seems to be stronger than I originally thought. How can it be so powerful? So, that mark is a symbol of her love for you? Gaara wondered aloud. Harry looked startled and touched his scar. I never really thought of it that way, he mumbled. In all honesty, he regarded it as a testament of the curse that killed his parents, an evil symbol that warranted stares and glances from anyone he met, something to be hated. Gaara's remark now made him think of the scar in a whole new light. Gaara unconsciously touched the kanji on his forehead, fingering each stroke the sand made upon him all those years ago, that he made on himself. So, why do you have that tattoo? Harry said quickly, eager to change the subject. The redhead was silent for a minute or two before he answered. I got it when I was 6, and I made it myself. With my sand, some sand emerged from his robes and he played with it, causing it to circle around his left hand, when I learned what my name meant. Everyone held their breath, waiting for more, but once Gaara turned to face them all, they could see that was all he was going to share with them at the moment. Hermione was itching to learn more, but had enough experience with boys to know that when they didn't want to talk about something, they weren't going to open up no matter what you did. So, she decided to change the subject. Where were you guys yesterday before dinner? Naruto appeared thoughtful for a moment, then his face lit up. We were training with Kakashi-sensei. Training? Where? Ron asked, having never seen them train near the grounds. In this forest by Hagrid's house. It's amazing. There are so many trees, and different animals, too. Of course, it's not as impressive as the Forest of Death, but... Wait. You've been in the Forbidden Forest, Ron said, his voice suddenly an octave higher. I guess if that's what you call it. But anyway, there are so many. You're not allowed in there, which is why it's called forbidden, Hermione said. Well, we didn't know. Naruto sighed. But why is it forbidden? It's not all that dangerous or scary. How far have you gone in? Ron said, clearly distressed. Deeper into the forest there are gigantic spiders and werewolves and... Well, I don't know what a werewolf is, Naruto said, but I do remember seeing these huge spiders a few days ago. We were finding a new place to practice, and these spiders came out of nowhere and attacked us. I used my shadow clones while Gaara used his sand to fight them, and once Kakashi used his Chidori on one and killed it, they all ran away. He frowned. They left before I could use my Rasengan, he added wistfully. The three wizards stared at them with their mouths open in amazement and astonishment. For a moment it looked like they were about to protest, but then they gave up. These shinobi were so different it was hard to deal with at times. Well, Ron finally said after a long pause, if I ever go into the Forbidden Forest again, I want to take you guys with me. You can come tomorrow, Naruto suggested. We practice every day. We could even teach you some jutsu. I think we're okay, Ron said quickly, holding his hands in front of him. Maybe later. Naruto pouted for a minute, then shrugged it off, instead indulging himself in a large yawn that for some reason made Harry think of Crookshanks. What, tired already? Kakashi smirked, suddenly appearing beside the blonde and startling the three wizards. Of course not, Kakashi-san, sensei, Naruto assured sleepily. I'm just a little sleepy. Kakashi rolled his eye. Whatever. It might be a good idea for everyone to go to bed, he suggested with a tone that left no room for argument. They all complied, and as Harry fell asleep in his bed he found himself dreaming about being the Triwizard champion. Once everyone had left, Gaara turned to the fire, ready to spend another sleepless night by himself. It was becoming harder than ever to concentrate because he felt homesick. That was the correct term, right? He had never gone this long without his siblings before. Of course, he usually stayed in his room or on the roof when he wasn't training, but he always knew they were nearby. He longed for the jokes Kankuro played on their older sister, for Temari chasing him down and beating the puppet master with her fan, and just the assurance that he had a real family. He had never really noticed it before, but now that he was spending time away from them he found himself missing them terribly. So how do you play this game? Gaara snapped his attention from the fire to the couch behind him, where the Jounin was sitting, examining the wizard's chessboard. Gaara just stared at him blankly, too startled to respond. Kakashi smiled, gesturing to the chair across from him. Would you teach me? Still surprised, Gaara simply nodded and made his way to the opposite chair. To get them to move, you call out their name and which quadrant you want them to go. The pieces are pawns, rooks, bishops, knights. And so the next 3 hours passed by without Gaara even noticing, getting caught up in teaching the Jounin the fascinating wizard's game and playing round after round after round. When the earliest indications of dawn were visible, Kakashi stretched and stood up. Well, I have to help Hagrid with his classes later today, so I should get a little rest. Do you mind playing a few games once a week? This is a very practical strategic game. Maybe we should teach Naruto how to play so he gets better at tactics. The redhead bit his lip for a second and nodded, seeming to be involved in an internal debate. Kakashi smiled and turned to go upstairs, but was stopped when Gaara ran forward and gave the man a speed hug. When the startled Jounin spun around, he saw Gaara a few feet behind him, absolute embarrassment etched on his face, clearly regretting what he had done. After a brief second of consideration, Kakashi smiled and put his hand on the Jinchuriki's head, ruffling it up the way Minato-sensei would always do to him. See you at breakfast, Gaara. As the genin sat back down on the chair, a calm and relaxing feeling washed over him, erasing the feeling of loneliness he had experienced earlier. Unknown to him, a warm smile had stretched across his face. Chapter 6: The Triwizard Tournament. The next morning at breakfast there was a large crowd gathered around the Goblet of Fire, and everyone watched as student after student entered their name. Not before long, Fred, George, and Lee Jordan burst into the Great Hall, boasting about how they had just taken an aging potion and were now able to enter their names. Despite Hermione's protests, the twins stepped forward to drop their names in together. Naruto smirked and got closer, eager to see what transpired next. There was brief pause where everyone thought it had worked, with Fred and George slapping each other's backs in victory, but then they were suddenly thrown out of the circle by some invisible explosive force, and immediately sprouted long white beards to rivals even Professor Dumbledore's. Naruto stared at the bearded twins with awe. He stepped forward and tentatively touched the levitating circle but was thrown back as well. His beard quickly caught up to the twins' size, and they stood there, laughing at each other while the rest of the students joined in. Hermione sighed. Why was she not surprised? I did warn you, Dumbledore chuckled as he made his way over to the three troublemakers. I suggest you both go up to Madame Pomfrey. She is already tending to Miss Fawcett, of Ravenclaw, and Mr. Summers, of Hufflepuff, both of whom decided to age themselves up a little too. Though I must say, either of their beards is anything as fine as yours. And so, Fred, George, and Naruto were accompanied by Lee Jordan as they made their way to the hospital wing, comparing each other's beards and laughing some more. It's nice to see Naruto has made some friends who share his affinity for pranks, Kakashi mused, coming up to join the three wizards and Gaara. Though I suppose growing a beard wasn't part of his intentions. Harry and Ron snorted. I think that goes both ways, Ron said. Other than Lee, no one else has been able to catch up with Fred and George. Seems like Naruto is their apprentice. They all spent a few more moments talking before getting up and deciding to leave now that the fun was over. Well, I promised to meet up with Hagrid after breakfast, Kakashi said when they left the Great Hall. He gave a lazy salute to the group of four before disappearing. By now the three wizards were accustomed to the way the Jounin was fast enough to vanish before their very eyes, but a few Hufflepuff first years weren't, and they nearly fainted from the sight of it. Might as well go down too, Harry said. We haven't paid him a visit yet. Okay, Ron agreed, just as long as he doesn't ask us to donate a few fingers to the Scrits. I just realized, I haven't asked Hagrid to join SBW yet, Hermione said. Wait for me, will you, while I nip upstairs and get the badges? Does she always act this enthusiastic? Gaara asked as they watched her retreating form. Ron snorted. You bet. If she gets motivated about something, you can be rest assured that she won't stop until she has done everything humanely possible, and then some. By the way, I'd watch out if I were you, he added in a more serious tone. Gaara blinked and gave Ron a confused stare. Why? From what I've seen, she seems to think that you and your mates are some sort of psychiatric. Psychiatric, Harry corrected him with a taunting smirk. Ron rolled his eyes. Fine, psychiatric nutcases, and she's more than likely going to do something about it. Why would she do something about it? Gaara still didn't understand what Ron was getting at. Sure, he was a mentally unstable murderer before, but he was doing better now. Naruto was loud and obnoxious but very kind, while Kakashi was mysterious and slightly threatening, especially with his reputation, but from what he had seen, as every bit as kind and comforting as a real father would be. Well, Ron said, scratching the back of his neck, wondering how to put it. You see, in our world, even the Muggle world, kids your age and younger don't usually go on missions to kill people or know how to handle weapons like you do. She thinks that you have been robbed of your childhood, or normal development, or something, Harry added. The redhead gave a noise dangerously close to a snort and nodded slowly. Well, she's got that right. Most shinobi don't have what you'd call a normal upbringing. Especially Naruto and me. But we're doing fine, he said. What could she want to change? Harry and Ron exchanged looks, seeing that Gaara didn't have a clue about how strange and different the three were. Just make sure to watch yourself around her, okay? Gaara shrugged, and as soon as Hermione joined them, they made their way to Hagrid's hut. About time, said Hagrid, when he'd flung open the door. Thought you lot had forgotten where I live. We've been really busy, Hag, Hermione started to say, but then stopped dead when she took in Hagrid's appearance. Standing in the doorway was Hagrid, but he was wearing a very hairy, brown suit, with a check yellow and orange tie, but the worst was his hair. Apparently, he had tried to tame his hair with what suspiciously appeared to be axle grease, slicked into 2 bunches in the back. Kakashi could be seen in the corner by Fong, trying to conceal his mirth at the 4 students' shocked faces. So, getting ready for the feast, Hagrid? Hermione managed to force out when she found her voice. The half-giant beamed. So ya noticed? What do ya think? Really nice, the 3 wizards blurted out quickly. Gaara just gave a slight nod of feigned approval. Well, come on in, he ordered happily, shooing them in through the doorway. Where's Naruto? He asked once Gaara stepped into the house. He joined Fred and George in trying to confuse the age line and wound up getting a beard. He's in the hospital wing right now, Hermione explained with an indignant tone in her voice. Hagrid threw his head back and laughed. Really? Figures. Can trick old Dumbledore now, can they? Once they all sat down, the 4 wizards began to immediately discuss what they thought would happen in the tournament. Gaara sat aloof, mentally shaking his head at the pathetic ideas the wizards came up with. Seriously, how could meeting up with a person who was half man, half wolf be scary? Half man, half demon would be more frightening. Maybe he and Naruto should enter the tournament as an obstacle. Just imagine the terrified looks on their faces, he thought with an uncharacteristic, sadistic glee. Perhaps Shikaku's influence wasn't completely eradicated as Gaara thought. He quickly squashed the idea and shook his head as if to dislodge the image from his memory. Kakashi glanced over to him in concern. What is it, Gaara? He asked in Japanese. It's nothing, Gaara said as he schooled his expression back into one of neutrality. This wasn't acceptable. With the lack of missions and fighting lately, Gaara could feel himself growing restless. He was no longer controlled by Shikaku's bloodthirsty urges, but it seemed like the peaceful, sedentary lifestyle was starting to have an effect on him. Okay, Kakashi said, but he didn't look entirely convinced. Turning back to the conversation, the 2 shinobi noticed the wizards were so engrossed in their conversation that they didn't even notice the 2 foreigners had spoken in their native tongue. The Jounin wondered briefly if it was even necessary. But Kakashi knows, Hagrid taunted, bringing the shinobi's attention to the discussion. We're making plans on when to meet the participants in the first task, he said with a wink, as if he and the copy ninja were sharing a very important secret. This only made the wizards turn to Kakashi and bombard him with questions, but he shook his head and looked at Hagrid, who was evidently enjoying this as much as he was. Kakashi smirked. Kids were so easy and fun to mess with. Once the interrogation calmed down, everyone ate lunch at Hagrid's, if you call mixing the food around and bringing microscopic pieces to your mouth eating. Then Hermione tried to entice Kakashi and Hagrid to join SBW, both of whom flat out refused. Slightly dejected, Hermione and the rest of the group headed up to the castle at dinner time, eager for the feast, and the announcement of the school champions, to start. Everyone met up with Naruto, Fred, and George upon entering the Great Hall. Naruto was yelling and waving his arms around, pointing to the seats beside him, saying, "We saved some seats for you." Which Kakashi quickly put an end to by suddenly appearing at his side and covering his mouth, much to everyone's relief. Hagrid had abandoned them outside his hut, choosing instead to walk Madame Maxime to the feast, leaving them all alone to try and contain their laughter at the sight of them. The Halloween feast was only somewhat enjoyed by the wizards, mainly because they were too anxious to find out who the champions would be, but the shinobi who couldn't really care less about the childish tournament fully enjoyed the exquisite meal, wanting to try all the new foods. Well, the goblet is almost ready to make its decision, Dumbledore began. I estimate that it requires 1 more minute. Then he went on to explain what the champions were to do when their name was called. When he was finished, the great hall was completely silent, many not daring to breathe. Suddenly the flames inside the goblet turned red, and a charred piece of parchment burst forth, only to be caught delicately by the aged professor, who proudly announced, "The champion for Durmstrang will be Victor Crumb." Everyone erupted in cheers, and the two shinobi noticed that the boy who stood up was the one that older man had been fussing over the other day. He certainly looked like a champion. He could even pass for a shinobi by build alone. Then Fleur Delacour was called for Beau's batons. Ron ogled after her as she went up, as well as some other boys, but Garo was at a total loss as to why, and Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts. The three shinobi winced in pain at the roar and pandemonium that ensued once Cedric's name was called, covering their sensitive ears in an effort to dull the noise. Once it ceased, Dumbledore said, "Excellent. Well, we now have our three champions. I am sure I can count upon all of you, including the remaining students from Beau's batons and Durmstrang, to give your champions every ounce of support you can muster. By cheering your champion on, you will contribute in a very real." The three shinobi sensed the power of the goblet before it even turned red, and knew that this could not be good. The same silence that had occurred before the naming of the champions had begun was back, only this time it was so strained that everyone felt uneasy, and even Naruto didn't have trouble keeping still. He may be a knuckle-headed ninja, but he had a very nagging feeling that this was the start of something very dangerous. It was as if needles were pricking his very skin and his senses suddenly went on high alert, as if they could locate the danger better if they tried. Harry Potter. The air was so thick with confusion, anger, and hatred that the three shinobi could almost taste it, felt as if they would drown in it. Kakashi's ears perked at the slight sense of real killer intent, but with all these other emotions swimming around and clouding his senses, he couldn't pinpoint who it was coming from. Harry was completely frozen, unable to comprehend that it was his name that Dumbledore had read off. Everyone was staring at him, even Hermione and Ron. "I didn't put my name in," Harry said. "You know I didn't." But neither of them looked like they believed him, they just stared back at him blankly. "Harry Potter!" Dumbledore called again. "Harry! Up here, if you please!" It sounded as if he were caught between feeling furious or afraid. When Harry still didn't move, Hermione gave him a slight push, and suddenly Kakashi was at his side. Startled, Harry glanced up at the Jounin who had a firm grip on his shoulder. It looked as if the Jounin was distracted, maybe sick even. I, Harry stammered. Kakashi turned to him, looking as if he was doing everything in his power to stand upright. "Come on," he whispered gruffly, pulling him to his feet. "It's best that we get you out of here." Nodding slightly, Harry allowed himself to be half dragged to the door the other champions had entered through. Once inside and out of sight, Kakashi's grip loosened, and once they came to a fireplace in a room lined with pictures of witches and wizards, he let go of Harry and leaned against it, his breathing a little heavier than normal. Curious as to the man's strange behavior, Harry croaked, "What's wrong?" The Jounin lifted one lazy eye in his direction and gave a weak smile. "We shinobi are trained in the ability to sense emotions. It usually doesn't overwhelm us, but in cases where there are a large group of people experiencing similar, strong emotions, it proves very difficult to concentrate. Because of our lifestyle, it's very rare to be in such a large group like in the Great Hall, especially with so many emotionally driven children," he said, but as he talked Harry noticed he was slowly getting his strength back. "This was the only way for me to politely leave before becoming too overwhelmed," he said with a full smile, pushing himself off the edge of the fireplace and walking towards him. "So, do you think I—" Kakashi shook his head. "No. The only emotions I'm sensing from you are confusion and more confusion. While it's true that some can mask their emotions so well that even the most accomplished of Jounin can't sense their feelings, I highly doubt a young wizard like yourself would be capable of doing that." He put a comforting hand on Harry's shoulders. "If you really put your name in there, it would have been a feat for you not to grow a beard, and you would be feeling pretty smug right about now." While Harry was in the process of whether or not to take Kakashi's statement as an insult or a compliment, the room was suddenly flooded with the other three champions, the headmasters, the overseers of the tournament, and some teachers, which, regrettably, included Snape. Kakashi quickly took his hand off Harry's shoulders and took a few steps backwards. The boy who lived calmly waited as Bagman explained the situation to everyone, while emotions ran from shocked and confused to anger and incredulity in varying degrees. "Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire, Harry?" Dumbledore asked, surprisingly calm despite the situation. Harry was rather grateful for that. "No," Harry said, willing everyone to believe him, which sadly only consisted about 5 of them. "Did you ask an older student to put it into the Goblet of Fire for you?" the professor asked again, ignoring the silent snort from Snape. No, Harry said vehemently. This only resulted in another uproar of people calling him a liar and demanding a recount, which ended once Mr. Crouch announced that according to the rules that there were now 4 champions. Towards the end of the argument, Mad-Eye Moody made his appearance. Maybe someone's hoping Potter is going to die for it, Moody growled. Harry froze at the implication. Did someone put his name in the goblet to make him die? Well, he could think of 100 people, but somehow one person's name kept floating to the top a little bit more than the others. You seem to have given this a great deal of thought, Mad-Eye, Karkaroff said coldly. There are those who'll turn innocent occasions to their advantage, Moody retorted just as harshly. It's my job to think the way dark wizards do, Karkaroff, as you ought to remember. Alastair, Dumbledore warned. However, Harry didn't have long to dwell on the accusation Moody's statement implied. He had other matters to think about. How this situation arose, we do not know, the headmaster continued, addressing everyone in the room. It seems to me, however, that we have no choice but to accept it. Both Cedric and Harry have been chosen to compete in the tournament. Once that was clear, Dumbledore turned the time over to Mr. Crouch to explain the first task. After that was finished, Harry was left to follow the others out of the room. While passing Kakashi, the Jounin whispered, "Once you leave, get out of sight. Hide yourself and I'll be right after you. I will accompany you to the common room." Puzzled by the statement, Harry nonetheless obeyed, saying goodbye to Cedric once they were out of earshot of the room, and hid himself in a dark corner, feeling slightly foolish. How can this be happening? Professor McGonagall asked to no one in particular. The only ones left in the room were herself, Snape, Moody, Dumbledore, and Kakashi. I do not know, Minerva, the headmaster sighed, rubbing his temples wearily. What do you think, Kakashi? The Jounin stepped forward and held out his hand for the charred parchment that contained Harry's name. Once it was placed in his hand, he held it up to his face and sniffed slightly. After a few minutes' pause, he shook his head. Potter didn't write this, it's not his scent. And what makes you think you can smell his scent? Snape spat. The Jounin turned to him patiently, locking eyes with the potion's master. Most of the people from where I come from have sensing capabilities far beyond that of an average human, he explained calmly. My sense of smell is only rivaled by the Inuzuka clan, and I can assuredly say without a doubt that this is not Harry Potter's scent. Do you know whose it is then? McGonagall asked, not entirely sure if she believed it herself, but she had seen enough strange things from these foreigners that she couldn't doubt him. Kakashi sighed. I cannot say. It is a smell that I haven't encountered yet at this school. Even then this scent is very faint, which could mean one of two things: either the one who wrote this did it a long time ago, which would leave a small trace of the original scent, or it was done by a person capable of hiding their scent. With the latter, I hardly doubt it, because the only ones capable of doing so are very skilled shinobi where I came from, and the chance that there are others like me here is almost non-existent. However, the chance that this was done such a long time ago that there was only a trace of the original scent left behind is also highly improbable, seeing as how someone had to have just recently entered this parchment into the goblet, and there would be a stronger scent. Clearly, the reason behind it has to be with something I have never encountered before, which, considering this is a brand new world for me, highly probable. McGonagall and Snape simply stared at the Jounin, clearly taken back by the wisdom and sheer genius behind his argument, which he undoubtedly came up with in the past few seconds. Snape was infuriated by being outsmarted by a man who was still a child, in his mind anyway. Dumbledore, however, looked impressed at the conclusion. Very good, he mused. Could I ask that you stay on the lookout for this scent? If you ever come across it, be sure to inform me. The copy ninja nodded, pocketing the slip of parchment into one of his pockets. If I ever encounter it, I will be sure to incapacitate the individual and bring him to you immediately. The ease at which he spoke of capturing the culprit behind the strange occurrence set the potions and transfiguration teachers on edge. Do you agree, Alastair? The Dada teacher appeared slightly startled at finally being addressed in the conversation, but he quickly recovered and gruffly nodded. Don't see any problems with that, he agreed. Just better keep an eye out for Potter. Naturally, Dumbledore said with a smile. Turning to Kakashi, he turned serious. Since you seem to have experience in these matters, would it be too much to ask for your help again? Only this time keep an eye out for Harry, making sure he doesn't get into too much trouble? I dare say he's become somewhat of an attraction for these things. The Jounin nodded. It would be my pleasure, he said with a small bow. Just think of it as a way for me to show my appreciation for your hospitality. Seeing as how their discussion was over, Snape, McGonagall, and Moody turned to leave. Oh, and Dumbledore-sama, Kakashi whispered as he passed the headmaster. I have reason to believe that what Professor Moody said was correct. I also have the ability to detect emotions, albeit faintly, and there was definite killer intent in the Great Hall when Harry's name was called. I was unable to pinpoint the location with all the other emotions, but I have reason to believe the one behind entering Harry's name and the one with the killer intent are one and the same. Ah, I see, Dumbledore whispered softly. Then it's true. I will also be on the lookout for the one behind that emotion, Kakashi assured him, before saying goodbye. If either of the two hadn't been so focused on their conversation, they might have noticed that a certain man's shoulders tensed at what Kakashi had unveiled and slightly panicked before realizing that he would have to be very careful with his proceedings in the future. But, he noted with slight glee, Lord Voldemort might find this new information very useful. The older foreigner needed to be taken care of, though. Harry was about to give in to the thought that Kakashi had abandoned him when the Jounin appeared in front of him and nudged his head in the direction of the Gryffindor common room. So, what's going on? Harry asked, trying to appear casual as he fell in sync with the Jounin. It seems as if there may truly be a more sinister reason behind your name being put in the goblet. Let me guess, the boy asked sarcastically, Dumbledore asked you to protect me? Kakashi was slightly taken aback by Harry's promptness on the issue, then smirked. I take it you have experience in these matters? The young wizard snorted. Since I was born, I seem to be a homing beacon for trouble. Seeing how there was more depth and meaning to what Harry said, Kakashi asked, since I don't need to hide the fact that I am keeping watch over you, would it be too personal to ask why you seem to be a very special wizard in this world? Why not? Everyone else knows the story, and I'd rather you knew the true version rather than one others might tell you. And so, their journey to the common room consisted of a very watered-down version of his dealings with Voldemort. When the fat lady opened the door, Harry and Kakashi were almost blown backwards by the noise. Inside was the whole Gryffindor house, full of students cheering and trying to shake his hand, give him sweets, or talk to him. You should have told us you'd entered. How did you do it without getting a beard? Brilliant! Oh, if it couldn't be me, at least it's a Gryffindor. We've got food, Harry, come and have some. Harry turned desperately to Kakashi and pleaded with his eyes for the Jounin to help him escape this. The silver-haired ninja chuckled softly, placed a firm hand on Harry's shoulder and held up the other in a hand seal, then disappeared in his signature white puff of smoke. There was silence for a moment, then everyone started cheering. Did you see that? I thought you couldn't apparate on school grounds? No, you idiot, didn't you see that smoke? There isn't any smoke when you apparate. I want to learn how to do that. Once they arrived on the top of the boys' dormitory stairs, Harry was in a slight daze from being transported, then shook his head and scanned their surroundings before breathing. Oh, how did you do that? Just one of my jutsu. Do you think you could teach me that sometime? He asked hopefully. Goodness knows how many times something like that could come in handy for the young wizard. Kakashi chuckled. Maybe. However, I think it's time to go to bed. You've had a rough night. That's an understatement, Harry muttered under his breath before obeying the command. Sadly, what he would find in his dormitory did little to lift his spirits, instead proving to be the beginning of a very, very long nightmare. Chapter 7: Fight in the Dungeons. The next morning Naruto and Gaara knew something was wrong when they came to breakfast, and only Ron was there, furiously stabbing his sausages as if he was trying to kill it. They exchanged a glance before sitting down and grabbing their food. Hey, where's Harry and Hermione? Naruto asked, cheerful as always despite the fact that it was early in the morning. Ron grumbled something about Hermione having already left, and he didn't care where the bloody hell that traitor was. Realizing that something bad had occurred between the two, Naruto smiled and stuffed the rest of his breakfast in his mouth, drained a full goblet of pumpkin juice to wash it down, then proudly proclaimed, Harry promised to teach me how to ride a broom. I'll go find him. Before dashing off. Ron just groaned, then looked at Gaara out of the corner of his eyes. He hesitated, then asked shakily, Can you believe that, Git? Gaara finished drinking and turned towards the redhead and lifted an invisible eyebrow. What? He knew all too well who Ron was talking about, but from his experience with Temari and Kankuro, Ron wanted to talk about it. The concept was simple. Once his siblings knew that he wasn't going to kill them in their sleep, they would occasionally join him on their roof and talk about how the other one drove them mad, or how a particular mission had affected them. The Jinchuriki surmised that it was due to the fact that he hardly spoke and didn't express his opinion that much that he was an easy person to talk to, a sort of outlet for people to unleash their feelings. And it looked like Ron was itching to let out some harbored feelings towards Harry. Harry! He keeps telling me that he didn't put his name in the goblet, but we all know that it was all for the glory. Seriously, he just gets one taste of it, and suddenly he wants all the limelight. He paused and took a bite of his mashed food, where Gaara simply nodded. And then, Ron continued, still chewing his food, he couldn't ebb and tell me, if Beth mate when he did it. Harry! Naruto yelled, searching the grounds. The blonde sighed. He really wanted to find him quick, because he couldn't wait to learn how to fly. Just then he spotted a boy with jet black hair walking with a girl with curly brown hair. He immediately sprinted in their direction, only stopping when he was in front of them. Harry! Said boy had a piece of toast halfway in his mouth, and was clearly taken by surprise with Naruto's sudden appearance. Ah! He swallowed his food. What do you want, Naruto? I was wondering when you could teach me how to ride a broom, he said. Harry smiled in spite of himself. Where's Gaara? Does he want to learn? Naruto shook his head. Nah, he uses his sand to fly, and I don't think he'd want to sit on a broom. He's still eating breakfast with Ron. Naruto took careful note of how Harry's eyes darkened when his friend's name was mentioned. Definitely fighting, Naruto thought. He had been in enough fights with Sasuke and seen enough angry Sakuras to know when friends were having a particularly bitter argument. How about after dinner? Meet me in the courtyard and I'll bring my firebolt and another broom. Awesome! Naruto cried, punching his fist in the air. Wait until I tell Kakashi-sensei. He's probably still sleeping, the lazy idiot, he said quietly to himself before disappearing again, leaving a pair of chuckling wizards in his wake. Harry smiled. Perhaps spending time with Naruto doing the one thing he enjoyed most would help relieve some of the tension that was building up with his fight with Ron. Later on that day, he realized that it would also be a nice break from all the glares and whisperings of his fellow peers. As he walked down to the courtyard after dinner, where he had made sure to ignore Ron, Harry smirked as he saw Naruto waiting for him. He was laying on the ground and staring up at the sky, where the tiniest indication of sunset had started to appear. Shikamaru's right. There is something calming about watching the clouds, Naruto said as Harry got closer. The wizard froze for a moment, then relaxed when he remembered that Naruto was probably able to sense him a while ago. I wonder if he's watching them right now, Naruto continued wistfully, or if he's on a mission with Chuji and Ino. He sighed while continuing to watch the clouds. Sakura saw us disappearing, and I wonder what she's doing right now, what Tsunade-bachan is doing to try and get us back. Harry squirmed a little, uncomfortable with Naruto's sorrow. He hadn't really considered how strange everything must feel for the shinobi, being suddenly taken from everything they knew and loved and whisked away to a brand new place where nothing was familiar, and they were where people spoke another language for Merlin's sake. It had to be troubling, no matter how safe they were here. How about we start now? He said, eager to make Naruto happy. For some reason, it was the most depressing thing not to see the blonde with a smile. Naruto beamed, then jumped up and sprinted over to Harry, eyeing the clean sweep 7. He noticed out of the corner of his eye that Harry appeared to relax at his smile, and inwardly smirked. Mission accomplished, he thought to himself. He had purposefully acted homesick, just to get Harry out of his brooding mood. People always seemed to forget about their troubles when a friend was feeling down, and would then try their best to appease them. Naruto had learned that trick from Konohamaru and his buddies when they came to cheer him up whenever he was feeling sad. They were pretty smart for their age. So, what's the first thing you do? Naruto asked. Well, I guess first you'll learn how to call the broom. Harry set the brooms in front of them. Place your right hand over the broom, and say, up. On his command, the firebolt rose up to meet him, and he clasped it firmly in his hand. What, you can't bend down and pick it up yourself? Naruto wondered aloud. Really, did these wizards rely on their magic so much that they couldn't do something as simple as that? You can, but this is how we learn how to do it. I'll admit it's all rather pointless, at least I think so, but this is how Madame Hooch teaches it. Harry shrugged. Just make sure you say it with feeling, treating the broom as if it is more than an object, he added. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the odd comment. Oh well. Whatever. Harry was the sensei. He held out his right hand and said with as much feeling as he could muster, up. On command, the broom flew up off the ground and collided with his hand with such force that Naruto yelped and shook his throbbing hand. Harry laughed in spite of himself, and after a small glare at the broom, Naruto found himself laughing as well. The next half hour was spent with Naruto learning how to properly mount a broom, and he practiced some basic flying exercises. Harry had to admit Naruto was pretty good for just a beginner, but he still had a ways to go if he was ever going to play with him and the team for fun. I think that's enough for today, Harry called, signaling that they should dismount. Naruto did so grudgingly, and sort of skidded on the ground, almost falling over in the process. This is where they're stored, so you can practice whenever you like, Harry said. It was dusk now, and they needed to get back to the dormitory before Filch got on their case. That night, Harry went up to the Oli via his invisible cloak to write a letter to Sirius, and when he started going back, he noticed something in the distance. Curious as to what it was, he ran to the other side of the roof to get a better view, and noticed with amazement that it was Naruto on a broom. He's practicing? Harry wondered as he watched the foreigner work on his form. The blonde would race around smoothly for a minute or so, then suddenly he'd get all wobbly and fall a little, only to catch himself and try again. Harry had to smile at his persistence and enthusiasm. Naruto was really dedicated. He watched in fascination as he repeatedly practiced again and again, improving slightly with each try. When the Hogwarts clock tolled 10, Harry was snapped out of his trance and decided to go to bed. Taking one last look at Naruto, he smiled warmly and whispered, "Make sure to get some sleep." Needless to say, the next few days were not the most enjoyable for Harry. The Hufflepuffs, Slytherins, and even the Ravenclaws all gave him dirty looks. Harry was used to it, sadly, but he usually had Ron by his side to distract him. Strangely enough, he didn't feel as lonely as he thought he would. Naruto seemed to have taken the place of Ron. Whenever Harry would mess up in a class because he was having trouble concentrating, Naruto would do something to make the whole class laugh, and lighten the mood to distract people from Harry. He also looked forward to his little flying lessons with Naruto, and even enjoyed watching him practice at night for as long as he could sacrifice. The bond's nighttime practices were paying off though. Naruto's skill was exponentially improving. Harry believed it was time to have him practice with the rest of the Gryffindor team. Double potions with Slytherin, Harry groaned to no one in particular as he, Naruto, and Hermione walked down to the dreary dungeons one morning. Potions was always the worst class, especially now, and he had a nagging feeling that today Malfoy and the other Slytherins had something up their sleeves in relation to his position as the fourth champion. Sure enough, standing just outside the classroom door was Malfoy and his group, and they were wearing large badges that for an instant appeared to be SPW badges, but Harry knew that could never happen in a million years. No, on closer inspection it turned out that they said, in luminous red letters, "Support Cedric Diggory, the real Hogwarts champion." "Like them, Potter?" Malfoy bellowed as Harry approached. "And this isn't all they do, look!" With a devilish grin, he pressed the badge firmly and that sign disappeared, only to be replaced by another that glowed green. "Potter stinks." At Harry's scowl all the Slytherins burst into laughter, with each of them pressing their badges to let the second message shine throughout the hall. "Oh, very funny," Hermione said sarcastically, really witty. Harry noticed Ron was standing against the wall with Dean, Seamus, and Gara. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't sticking up for Harry either. "Want one, Granger?" Malfoy taunted, dangling a badge in front of Hermione's nose. "I've got loads. But don't touch my hand, now. I've just washed it, you see, don't want a mudblood sliming it up." All of Harry's harbored anger boiled over and he reached for his wand so fast that even Naruto and Gara were impressed. People in the corridor began to back away slowly, not wishing to be caught in the crossfire. "Harry!" Hermione warned. "Go on, then, Potter," Malfoy said quietly, drawing his own wand. "Moody's not here to look after you now, do it if you've got the guts." Harry was in the process of uttering a curse, when he felt someone's hand rest lightly but firmly on his shoulder. He turned around startled, afraid it was Snape, but it was Gara, and he stared at Malfoy with an unsettling calmness in his eyes which could only mean trouble. Gara stepped in front of Harry and got closer to Malfoy, whose wand was trembling slightly in his hand. "I don't like your badges," he said coolly, and stretched forth his right hand. Suddenly, sand shot out from Gara's robes, and it ripped off the badges from all the Slytherins who wore one, tearing their clothes slightly in the process. Bringing the clumped mixture of badges and sand in front of Malfoy's face, Gara smirked slightly while he completely covered them in sand until it was a spherical ball, and said, "Sabaku Soshu." Malfoy shrieked in surprise as the levitating sphere of sand collapsed inward with a small explosion, faint red and green smoke steaming out from it. "Here's your badges," Gara mocked, opening his hand and letting the various debris fall to the floor in front of Malfoy, who stared at the minuscule pieces fearfully. As people in the hall began whispering to each other in excitement, Gara turned to a gaping Harry. "Everything all right, Har?" "Densajo!" Malfoy screamed. A jet of light whizzed past Harry, but Gara was gone. "Nice try," a voice taunted from above. Everyone's necks craned up to see Gara hanging upside down from the ceiling as if he was sticking to it, arms folded. Before anyone had time to be impressed with the fact that he was standing on the ceiling, a cry from Ron caught their attention. Hermione! Ron was at her side, dragging Hermione's hand away from her mouth. Naruto gasped as he witnessed her front teeth growing at an alarming rate, making her appearance resemble a human beaver. He turned to Malfoy and growled. Naruto? The genin looked up at Gaara, who gave him a slight nod in Malfoy's direction. Grinning in a rather frightening way, Naruto cracked his knuckles and inched towards Malfoy, who turned to him in terror. That's not very nice, Naruto said. Terror clouding his senses, Malfoy yelled, Furnunculus. This time everyone was expecting it, so they ducked as the spell slashed through the air where Naruto had been a mere second before, except for poor Goyle, who had started running away when Naruto turned to Malfoy. He howled as he fell, covering his face. You're pathetic, Naruto whispered behind Malfoy. Kaiga Bunshin no Jutsu. The audience gasped as 3 other Narutos appeared in a puff of smoke. All right. Let's go. Suddenly all 4 Narutos began running in a circle around Malfoy, although it was the strangest running any of the wizards had ever seen. They leaned forward, and let their arms flap behind them, as if getting ready to jump. The Narutos ran steadily faster, until they were nothing but a blur. After a minute or so of this, one Naruto withdrew from the formation, and slid into the boy's legs, feet first from behind. Another clone separated, this time in front of Malfoy, delivering an upward thrust into his stomach. Zu, the third clone delivered a spinning kick to his chest, barreling him into the wall. Maki, the real Naruto jumped in the air, reached into his weapon pouch he kept concealed underneath his robe, and spun as he threw shuriken at Malfoy. Naruto ran down. All the other clones disappeared as Naruto landed on the floor, perfectly balanced, with one hand steadying himself on the ground and the other still in the air. As the dust cleared, Naruto calmly stood up, brushed his hands, and examined his handiwork. Not bad, he congratulated himself. Malfoy was pinned to the wall by shuriken, which, to some of the onlookers' chagrin, did not harm him in any way, so that his feet didn't touch the ground. He was panting and coughing, gasping for breath. It wasn't Naruto's usual jutsu, but if he completed it and used another clone, then that weak wizard would have been forced to spend some time in a hospital for a couple broken bones. It would be hard explaining that one to Kakashi-sensei and Dumbledore-sama. Gaara jumped down beside him and gave Malfoy a thoughtful look, then a satisfied nod to Naruto. It was Pansy Parkinson who found her voice first. We're telling. Gaara frowned, and then cautiously made his way over to Draco. Do you know, he began in whisper, so that only Malfoy would hear, how deadly a single grain of sand is. At this he held up his hand where a minuscule piece of sand floated just above it. When it is red hot, it transformed from a pale brown to a fiery red, and traveling through your flesh at 160 kilometers per hour, especially when aimed at your heart? Malfoy's eyes widened and furiously began shaking his head. No? Then don't tell what happened here, or else you'll find out. Gaara almost felt pity for the slimy blonde, he looked so pathetically frightened. Take them down, Gaara said as he turned around and faced Naruto. Naruto sighed, then yanked the air as the shuriken dislodged themselves from the wall and flew towards him. If it weren't for the small reflection of light off the string that was attached to the shuriken, the wizards would have assumed he had used a summoning spell. As Naruto pocketed the weapons, Malfoy pushed himself off the ground, shaking as he did so. Soon all the Slytherins were at his side. Are you all right? They're dead for sure. Wait till Snape hears about this. No. They all stared at Malfoy. And no, Snape doesn't need to know. It was just a misunderstanding. As his friends started to protest, he glared at them in an expression of how serious he was. Everyone's attention was then directed to Goyle, whose face now resembled a new species of fungi. As they stood there, silent except for the quiet whimpering of Hermione and Goyle, a soft, deadly voice rang out. And what is all this noise about? Their potions master had arrived, his penetrating glare taking in everything he saw. When it was apparent no one wanted to speak, he pointed a finger at Malfoy. Explain. He gulped. Well, Potter was about to hex me, so I defended myself, but got Hermione, and another got Goyle and Snape examined the 2 fallen wizards, telling Goyle to report the hospital wing. After a long, calculating stare at Hermione, he said coldly, I see no difference. The young girl burst into tears and ran out of the corridor, and out of the dungeon. Harry, Ron, and Naruto all began shouting at once, with Naruto in Japanese. Snape couldn't tell what they were saying, but he understood the meaning. Let's see, 50 points each from Gryffindor, and you 3 have detention. He paused for a moment, then added, goes for you, too, pointing at Gaara, who was giving his best impersonation of an innocent child, yet it obviously didn't go over so well. He didn't really have much experience in the matter. The professor had no idea what happened to Malfoy, but by the fact that he wasn't willing to say it to him meant that the newcomers had something to do with it. Maybe he could find out later. The rest of the class passed by without anything else exciting, except for Harry being summoned for the weighing of the wands. All of Harry's hopes of possibly coming on better terms with Ron disappeared when Colin mentioned photographs. He silently cursed the little boy as he left, leaving the two shinobi to deal with a pissed-off redhead. Sadly, his break from potions didn't necessarily lighten his mood, because Rita was there, waiting for him. As Malfoy left potions that day and watched the two shinobi happily talk to each other, well, one seemed happy, he vowed he would get them back. No one messed with him and got away with it. Chapter 8: Bitter Rivalries and Taijutsu? Next weekend is Hogsmeade, Hermione said at breakfast, in a futile attempt to spark some conversation between the two bickering wizards. What's a Hogsmeade? Naruto asked, ripping off a piece of his pastry and then drowning it in pumpkin juice. He was quite intrigued by the wide variety of food this place offered, and surprisingly found it to be really good, even though there wasn't any ramen. A wizard village full of fun shops, Harry said. Like Diagon Alley? Naruto asked. He really enjoyed the place Hagrid had taken them. It reminded him of the marketplace from his dimension, but better. There were so many vibrant colors and the shops were full of interesting things the shinobi had never seen before. He was actually sad they had to leave so soon. Yeah, only not as big, Hermione said. There are really great shops, like the Three Broomsticks, Zonko's gift shop, the Shrieking Shack. You need a parent permission form to go though, Ron said offhandedly. Naruto's face fell. Oh, he said slowly. Then I guess you guys will have to have fun without us. Ron looked up, startled, and the tips of his ears flushed pink. Why, you could have Kakashi sign a permission form for you. He's pretty much your guardian, and McGonagall really only wants a signature from your legal guardian, he said in a rush. Really? All right. Come on, Gaara, Naruto said as he grabbed his friend's shoulder. Let's go find Kakashi-sensei right now. Gaara choked on his bagel and smacked Naruto's hand away. He's eating breakfast at the moment, Gaara said once he was able to breathe again. Wait until we're done. We've got until tomorrow. Naruto nodded sheepishly at the other genin's logic and sat back down to finish his meal. Ron and Harry smirked, then turned to each other like they would normally do, but once their eyes met they quickly looked away, smiles turning to scowls. Hermione sighed and rested her face in her hand, the other playing with her food. She had suddenly lost her appetite. Once everyone was finished, Harry and Ron quickly left without saying a word to each other. Naruto ran towards Kakashi, while Gaara slowly got up, then turned back around and looked at Hermione. He stood there awkwardly, as if he weren't sure how to proceed, then leaned forward. Don't worry, Hermione, he said, almost like a whisper. My older sister and brother fight all the time, but they always get over it. The girl appeared startled at his voice, then looked up at him hopefully. Really? Well, they've always fought before, but it was over little things. This one has deeper sides to it than any other fight they've had though. She paused and bit her lip. Did your siblings ever have a fight this long? Gaara thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, but from what I've gathered from listening to Ron, it's more about his position in his family than it has to do with Harry. They'll get over it sooner or later. Hermione gave a weak smile. I guess so. It's just so frustrating, being the only girl of the group. I've got to keep them together all the time. The young genin nodded. So does my sister. She's the oldest of Kankuro and me. When our mother died, Gaara froze. What in the hell was he doing? He never talked about personal issues with anyone before, not even his own siblings or Naruto. Was there something wrong with him? Was this dimension affecting him in some way? Gaara? He snapped his attention back to Hermione, who wore a strange expression on her face. Gaara wasn't really sure what it was supposed to be, but he felt uncomfortable having it directed at him. She looked both sad and happy at the same time. It wasn't an expression the shinobi wasn't used to seeing. Hermione then seemed to grow hesitant at his silence, then she reached out and lightly touched his hand. Gaara flinched from the contact as if it had burned his skin. This seemed to make Hermione even more saddened, and Gaara realized he was failing horribly at trying to cheer her up. My sister Temari had to take over the duties of our mother, and she was only 5, Gaara said, finding himself rambling to stop Hermione from looking at him like that. Kankuro was 3, and I was just born. She was very strong, raising the two of us, even though we were a handful. You remind me of her, a little, Gaara said, ending softly. Hermione's eyes widened at the last comment. Your friends will be fine. Hermione nodded slowly, then smiled and uttered a quiet thank you. As Gaara quickly joined Kakashi and Naruto, he felt uneasy. He really wasn't one to give advice or try to cheer someone up like that. To be honest, he didn't understand why he even bothered to do so in the first place. Though, he supposed he felt normal here. No one knew what he was or what he had done, and it felt nice. The moment they found out the truth about him, though, he knew all the kindness would disappear. But there was no way for that to happen, so there was no need to worry. Sure, I'll write you both a permission form, Naruto, Kakashi said, pulling Gaara back into the conversation. I guess I'll be going as well. I've got to keep an eye on Harry. Thank you, Sensei, Naruto said. Come on, Gaara, we have to go to class. The two genin said goodbye to the Jounin before heading to Transfiguration. So, how are things going with Ran? Naruto asked casually, his hands placed behind his head in their familiar spot. Gaara shrugged. Yeah, same here. There was silence for a few moments. They're acting just like me and Sasuke, sorta, Naruto said. And my siblings, Gaara added. Ah, well. They'll get over it soon, the blonde said with a smile. Then his expression changed. How do you think things are going back home? I remember seeing Sakura-chan right before we left Konoha Hospital. What do you think happened? The redhead shrugged again, becoming lost in his own thoughts about what his siblings were doing. How do you think our villages are taking it? Gaara asked, a small hint of sarcasm in his tone. Naruto snorted. Probably jumping for joy, at least the elders are. They will see this as the perfect opportunity to finally be rid of me. Gaara had to agree. By now they had just entered the Transfiguration classroom and a couple students were staring at them with rapt fascination, listening to their Japanese. The two shinobi were startled for a moment, then realized that apparently the other wizards found their dialect interesting. What, never heard a different language before? Naruto huffed. They were looking at him as if he were some animal at a zoo. Professor McGonagall stepped forward. Mizuto Uzumaki and Gaara, each time Tuesday Tai cure seats. Eh? What was she saying? After a few seconds it dawned on Naruto and Gaara. The spell wore off, Naruto said. He grabbed Gaara's sleeve. We have to see Dumbledore-sama right now. Just as they were about to leave, McGonagall shouted, Stop! The two genin swung around to face her, able to get the idea of what she meant by her raised hand. She gestured to Naruto's Hittite and then at her hand, signaling that they give it to her. The two shinobi quickly took them off and gave it to her, where she performed the same string of words Dumbledore did on their first day there. Now I'm guessing your sensei's has probably worn off as well? Is there a way to find him? Naruto nodded. Yeah, but he's already learned your language and doesn't need the spell. McGonagall was shocked for a moment, but oddly found herself not too surprised. Well then, it's time for you two to take your seats. Kakashi Senesi, Naruto yelled, after spotting the Jounin in the common room after lunch. Our translation spells wore off before Transfiguration, but Professor McGonagall fixed it for us. We? The Jounin waved them off, and then with a happy yet mischievous tone in his voice, said in an undertone, While I was with Dumbledore-sama, he told me of an offer for all three of us that I know none of us could refuse. The next day, Harry, Ron, and Hermione couldn't help but notice that the shinobi appeared to be strangely giddy, with even Gaara slightly distracted. Harry knew that they had left after dinner yesterday to who knows where, and they still weren't back when he finally went to sleep. When he asked Naruto about it, he just grinned in his special way and said, You'll see later on today. After lunch, they discovered the reason, or at least part of it. There was a notice that read, Special class for all interested. Kakashi Hatake and his students will be offering lessons for fighting techniques taught exclusively from their hometown. Anyone interested should report to the castle grounds at 4 p.m. These will be held every consecutive Thursday from this point on. Techniques from their hometown? Hermione read in surprise. Harry started grinning with an almost uncontrollable excitement. Do you think it means they will teach us how to do all that stuff they showed us earlier? He began fantasizing about being able to clone himself like Naruto did, or be able to control the elements like Gaara. Noticing his look, Hermione sighed. I admit their abilities are unbelievable, but the chances that we will be able to perform them are slim. From what they've said about their chakra, their bodies are structured so that they are able to expel that energy. We can only expel our energy through use of our wands or accidents. I seriously doubt. Don't ruin it, Hermione, Harry sighed. I just think it would be fun. You said so yourself that their abilities are unbelievable, so maybe they know a way we can do it too. Realizing nothing else she could say would convince him otherwise, Hermione simply gave up with a small sigh. At the appointed time, Harry and Hermione found themselves joined by Neville as well as a fair number of people he knew on the grounds, some even from Durmstrang and Beauxbatons. With a pang of anger and regret, he spotted Ron a couple feet to his left, surrounded by his brothers and Lee Jordan. The only thing missing were the teachers. He glanced at his watch. 4:03 p.m., where were they? Everyone was gathered near a small podium that was undoubtedly for the purpose of teaching whatever the shinobi had in mind, but they were nowhere in sight. Suddenly there was a puff of smoke and Kakashi appeared, much to the cries of surprise and wonder of many of the students. Then a billow of sand appeared to his right, and they stared in amazement as it transformed into Gaara, and he was wearing his outfit that he had when he first arrived. As he and the rest of the students eagerly awaited Naruto's entrance, a smirking Malfoy stepped up on the platform on Kakashi's left. Harry and those around him groaned, but then started choking on their own spit when Malfoy did something outrageous. Malfoy had been standing there with his arms folded, his ever-present smirk on his face, and then he held his hand over his mouth. He muttered something incoherent, and there was a puff of smoke and, when he pulled his hand away, he had the thickest lips anyone had ever seen before. They practically reached down to his chin. As everyone's eyes bulged and some even stopped breathing out of pure shock, Malfoy erupted in a similar puff of smoke like Kakashi and Naruto, in all his bright, orange glory, was standing in his place. He smirked and took a small bow, which after a brief second of silence was met with explosive applause. Many burst into laughter with tears in their eyes at what they had just witnessed. "That was better than the Boggart Snape in your grandmother's outfit," Seamus cheered, nudging Neville in the ribs playfully, who was bent over with laughter at the moment. Naruto grinned happily. He didn't have any special transportation jutsu like Kakashi and Gaara, but he sure knew how to make an entrance. Gaara and Kakashi just shook their heads slowly. "Always keeps you on your toes," Kakashi thought wryly to himself. However, it was time to get started. He took a small step forward and motioned for silence. "For all of you who came on the pretense of learning these jutsu that we call them," he began, gesturing to the three of them, "I'm sorry to say that you are gravely mistaken. They are secrets known to our village, and we have sworn on our lives never to reveal them to outsiders. It seems it's also impossible for your bodies to manipulate your magic that way anyway." "Told you," Hermione whispered. "However, your headmaster Dumbledore-sama has given us the permission to hold a taijutsu class." When he was met with confused glances, he sighed and translated, "Taijutsu means hand-to-hand combat." As soon as he stopped talking, everyone erupted in excited chatter, willing to overlook the fact that their earlier hopes were dashed. "Don't you think that would be fun to learn, Harry?" Neville asked timidly, since he, Harry, and Seamus had come out of curiosity like the rest of the students. "Just make sure you don't go using this stuff on Malfoy," Hermione warned. Her mother tone had surfaced, and she pointed a finger at Harry. "It will cause more problems than you can handle." Harry grinned at the image. Malfoy was definitely a possibility, as well as Dudley. He smirked as he imagined his gigantic cousin trying to punch him as he easily blocked him with one slight flick of his wrist. Kakashi held up his hand, motioning for silence again. Once his command had been carried out, he explained, "Naruto and Gaara will assist me. You will all need a partner, and must take care not to hurt anyone. You and your partner will alternate between attacking and defending. Just in case someone does get hurt, your school nurse is here on guard. Any questions?" "What's the purpose in learning this?" a snide voice boomed, carrying across the castle grounds. "You're not even from around here, so how can you be certified to teach us?" Harry turned to the voice angrily, wondering why in the world his least favorite person was there. By the grim scowl on the Slytherin's face, Harry could tell the joke Naruto had played had not gone over well. Kakashi folded his arms and gave a small chuckle, his shoulders moving up and down slightly. Naruto covered his mouth but was unable to contain his laughter, so he fell over laughing, clutching his stomach and kicking his feet in the air. That blonde brat didn't know who he was dealing with. Before people could even goggle at Naruto's strange behavior, Kakashi had disappeared, only to reappear behind a startled Malfoy, holding a sharp kunai to his throat. Once everyone had ceased shrieking at how fast the shinobi had moved, Kakashi turned his attention to the whimpering boy in front of him. "So you can protect yourself from something like this, brat," he hissed, bringing the kunai closer to Draco's neck. Once he saw the boy understood him, Kakashi released him and returned to the podium as fast as he had left it. After scanning the group of gaping students, he began, "To answer Draco's first question," he said, holding up a finger, "you all seem to rely too much on your wands in combat, which is part of the reason your headmaster allowed me to teach this class. What would happen if for some reason you lost possession of your wand in the middle of a battle? What would you do? How would you defend yourself? Where I come from, we focus all efforts on learning more than one way to attack and defend. Taijutsu is just one form of combat." He held up a second finger, and although his face was concealed, many could tell he was grinning mischievously. To answer his second question, I am more than qualified. By the age of 6, I knew over 100 ways to kill a man with my bare hands. By age 14, I became a member of the most powerful organization my village has, the ANBU, which translates into your language as the Assassination Tactics Special Military Force. He paused as realization sunk in. Yes, at an age when most of you kids were still sucking your thumbs, I was going on squad or solo assassination missions to protect my village from destruction. Many people gasped and stared up at the man before them in horror. Was he that good? The copy ninja chuckled happily. Oh, how he enjoyed frightening the younger children. Now, to your training. He turned to Naruto and Gaara, each of whom nodded in turn. To ensure you that what you shall be learning is actually helpful, I will give you a demonstration of how you might be able to use the skills you learn here. Naruto and Gaara will come at me using only taijutsu, he said with a little emphasis, mainly glaring at Naruto, who grinned sheepishly. Trust Naruto to let his competitive spirit get the best of him. Everyone was dead silent as the three shinobi prepared themselves in a defensive position. They had moved from the podium to a large open space to everyone's right and got themselves situated. The only things that moved were the leaves that swayed in the wind. Suddenly Kakashi reached behind him for his weapons pouch. The crowd tensed, wondering what he'd do, while Naruto snorted. Show off, he muttered to himself. To everyone's surprise but Naruto's, Kakashi pulled out a small orange book with his left hand and began reading. Start. He's reading a book? Hermione wondered skeptically. He can't be serious. There is no way a person can focus enough attention on reading and defend themselves at the same time. The others shared her doubt. Naruto and Gaara charged, while at the last second splitting off into different directions. Naruto suddenly appeared behind Kakashi and attempted a spinning kick while Kakashi just squatted down to avoid it, still reading. Meanwhile Gaara came from the left, arm curled in a fist towards the crouching shinobi, who merely stuck out his right hand to catch it, not even looking up. Gaara used the hand Kakashi gripped as leverage, shifted his center of gravity, and spun his right leg around to kick him in the face. Kakashi gripped the fist tighter and then jumped into the air, performing a quick front flip with Gaara still in tow, and as soon as his feet touched ground, Kakashi swung Gaara into Naruto, who had been attempting to sneak up behind him. Too surprised by what had happened, Naruto wasn't able to move out of the way, and with Gaara having spent too much energy concentrating on subduing the Sans will to break his fall so that he could fight normally, the two genin collided and crashed onto the ground in a big heap. The students let out a breath they had all been holding. It all happened so fast they almost couldn't tell what happened. That guy had blocked all their attacks without so much as a glance. Kakashi smiled and looked up from his book. Over already? I must say you have improved more than the last time we fought Naruto, but not much. I also expected more from you, Gaara of the desert, he taunted. Naruto practically threw Gaara off him and stood up angrily, crossing his hands to make a T. I'm going to make you stop reading your pervy book, sensei. Naruto hollered. Kaige Bunshin no Jutsu. Those who hadn't witnessed what happened in the dungeons gasped in shock and amazement, as 5 clones of Naruto appeared beside him in small puffs of smoke. The blonde leaped into the air, his clones close behind him. Let's see you defend 6 of me while reading. The Jounin sighed. For some reason he was having a vague sense of déjà vu from the first time they engaged in combat. Would Naruto fall for the same trick? He wondered silently as he proceeded to pocket his favorite book. Also, didn't I say to only use taijutsu? Sure enough, Kakashi sensed the presence of another Bunshin come behind him, and again, he allowed himself to be caught by surprise. In no time at all the other Bunshin grasped his legs in a pitiful attempt to hold him down, while Naruto came crashing down in front of him. But at the last second Naruto twisted in midair and flung numerous shuriken towards the tree where he knew his sensei was hiding. Looks like he has improved, Kakashi thought proudly, easily jumping down from the tree out of harm's way. However, as soon as he touched the ground, Gaara rose up out of the dirt, style, surrounding him. Guess I should actually do some hand-to-hand combat now. With that, Kakashi prepared himself and blocked, parried, and fended every kick, blow, or punch thrown his way by Gaara's clones. Soon Naruto joined the attacks with his shadow clones, and Kakashi admittedly found himself expending more energy and focus than he originally thought he would have. However, after a couple minutes of intense fighting, he performed a quick seal as he rolled in midair, and in an instant every sand or shadow clone had a clone of himself behind them, a kunai to their throat. The shinobi slid on the ground, using his hand to support himself, and then stood up, brushing the dirt off his clothes composedly. That'll be enough for today, he said simply. Naruto and Gaara nodded, and soon all three dispelled their clones at once. Kakashi brought his hand up to his chin and appeared thoughtful. You guys did pretty well, better than I expected, even if you used ninjutsu when I wanted just taijutsu. The two shinobi found themselves conveniently distracted by something in the trees, then he faced the wizards as if nothing had ever happened. If you work hard, you might be able to last a few seconds in a battle like this. Find a partner and make sure you are all a safe distance away from each other. He paused as everyone carried out his orders. Let's begin. As everyone walked up to the castle an hour later, many were talking non-stop about what they had witnessed and learned, with many first years practicing some of the moves as they walked, full of energy. Harry, Hermione, Neville, Seamus, Ron, the twins, and Lee Jordan all stayed behind, eager to speak with the shinobi and congratulate them. That was bloody wicked, Fred exclaimed once they were alone. Truly an art, George agreed. He brushed away a false tear. I'm coming every week, Seamus said. The shinobi smiled, though Gaara just looked slightly pleased. This continued as they made their way to the Great Hall for dinner, and throughout the meal. Harry and Ron made sure they were on opposite sides of the shinobi, of course. Needless to say, the shinobi were the most popular people that night. They were bombarded with questions in the common room once dinner was adjourned. Gaara was slightly apprehensive at all the attention, not used to all the grins and pleasant comments being directed at him. As time wore on, though, he felt more comfortable, if not just due to the fact that people were staying up later, meaning that he had less time being all alone in the common room. Naruto was soaking every compliment thrown his way, having never received much positive attention from his pranks before. There was Konohamaru and his friends, but that was about it. As Kakashi observed the scene, trying to answer as many questions that were directed at him as kindly as he couldn't be more pleased. Not only were Naruto and Gaara being treated like humans instead of monsters, he had hoped to send a message to whomever he was trailing in protection of Harry that he and his students were not to be reckoned with. He wanted the person to know that they would have to think twice before trying to get in the way of his mission, that they would get possession of Harry over his dead body. The next morning was slightly less eventful, but Harry's spirits fell as soon as he glanced at the headline article Hermione was doing her best to hide from him. The fourth Triwizard Champion? The exclusive interview with the boy who lived. He groaned and realized that this was most likely the first of many uncomfortable and embarrassing situations to come. I'll kill that woman. Chapter 9, Butterbeer, Dragons, and Sirius. This place is amazing, Naruto yelled happily, spinning around to try and look at all the shops at once. Hermione smirked. At least with him around I won't look like an idiot talking to myself if I want to talk to you, she snapped at Harry. He rolled his eyes. Hermione, you know what would happen if I showed myself. People would bombard me with questions or throw tissues at me, all because of what that. He paused for a second and quickly jumped out of the way of someone who ran past them. Devil woman wrote about me, he finished in a whisper. He had a more colorful word in mind but couldn't say it in front of Hermione. How about we meet up with Ron over by? No. She sighed in frustration, pulling a strand of hair behind her head and threw up her shoulders in defeat. Fine. Have it your way. Hermione! Hermione! Naruto exclaimed, suddenly appeared inches from her face, causing the girl to shriek in surprise and fall backwards into an unprepared Harry who quickly pushed her back up, worried about anyone seeing the strange sight. Wah, what is it, Naruto? She asked calmly, trying to regain her composure. Can we go there? He pleaded, pointing to an inviting shop that many people were entering and exiting. It has brooms like in Quidditch. Harry chuckled. Naruto didn't know how to read English, but he was able to decipher the meaning behind the 3 broomsticks bundled together next to the sign. That's an excellent idea, Naruto, Hermione said happily. A tall glass of butterbeer is just what we need. Naruto frowned for a second then shook his finger motherly at them. Even where I come from, you're not allowed to have sake until you're at least 15 years old, although Erosenin did tell me Tsunade broke that rule a million times over, he added in an undertone to himself. The two wizards stared at him for a second in bewilderment before Hermione sighed. It's not real beer, that's just the name for it. Butterbeer is one of the most popular drinks around here, and you'll find out why once you try one. By the way, how old was this Tsunade when she started drinking sake? She added as an afterthought as they made their way into the warm shop, the tantalizing aromas rushing over them. Erosenin guessed around 12, Naruto said with a smirk, glancing at everything around him while still focusing on the conversation. She's been a drunk ever since, and I've had to throw water on her every once in a while, with the help of Shizen. It's tough work at times, but at first she had a reason to, with all her precious people dying and all, But now that she's Hokage, it's a little better for her, so she doesn't do it as much. As Naruto began to ramble on and on about the drunken lady, Harry paid attention to Hermione's face and noticed her dismay at hearing such a story, and he found himself wincing at the look in her eye. The wizard swore that if she could, his friend would make sure Naruto and his friends never went home, insisting that they receive a better upbringing and then maybe even go over to where they came from and try to save all the murderous and drunken 12-year-olds. Hermione? He whispered, trying to distract her from the ideas no doubt formulating in her mind. The drinks? She blinked. Oh, right. She lightly tapped Naruto's shoulder and gestured for him to follow her to the counter to receive their drinks. Seeing how crowded it was, Harry didn't dare follow, so instead he tried to search for an open table. To his discomfort, he spotted Ron sitting with Fred, George, Lee Jordan, and Gaara, who appeared to be quite fascinated by the butterbeer and was drinking it contentedly, as if it was the most amazing thing he had ever come across. Resisting the urge to hit Ron or spill his drink, he sniggered at the thought of Gaara becoming addicted to butterbeer. He wondered if it would have any sort of effect on the strange shinobi. Suddenly he spotted Kakashi sitting by himself at a table, a glass of butterbeer to the side and a large book in front of him. Harry had always seen him with his nose in a book, and was puzzled as to why. He probably reads more than Hermione. Has he read the whole library yet? The Jounin suddenly glanced up, as if he could hear Harry's thoughts, and seemed to zero in on him. He raised his visible eyebrow and then gestured over to the table. Harry quickly turned around to see who he was pointing to, and when there was no one, stared back at the shinobi who appeared to sigh for a moment. Very carefully Kakashi lifted up his headband and slowly opened his eyelid, revealing the Sharingan underneath, meeting Harry's eyes perfectly. The boy shuddered slightly, still wary of that eye, and realized that he most likely was able to see him, or at least sense him like Gaara did. Does that eye see through invisible cloaks? Harry quickly maneuvered around the different tables to find a seat to Kakashi's right, who calmly covered his disfigured eye and focused his attention back to his reading. Didn't want anyone to know you were here, any? He asked quietly, not even taking his gaze off the book. Harry could have sworn the Jounin was smiling underneath that mask. Exactly. Wouldn't blame you. Your wizard abilities still fascinate me, creating a cloak that's invisible? That's a type of jutsu people in my world would kill for. Harry found himself not doubting Kakashi's words one bit. So, what are you doing here? He asked, eager to divert the topic of the conversation from death, which the shinobi talked about with too much ease for Harry's comfort. Just wanted to check out the town for anything crucial to your predicament, he said casually. While inspecting the different shops, I overheard some students discussing this place, and going on and on about how great this butterbeer tasted, so I decided to come taste it for myself. It wasn't what I expected, but it's quite good. There's even a small hint of sake taste in it. Harry's eyes widened. Sake? But from how Naruto described it, sake is like alcohol. He hastily sought out Madame Rosmerta and stared. What else is in our drinks? Kakashi frowned, sensing his discomfort. You know what sake is then? Yeah, Naruto was talking about some Tsunade lady when he thought butterbeer was actual beer. Don't worry, the taste isn't alcohol, it's just the flavoring that makes sake so enjoyable. In our world, sake is alcohol with some flavoring to it, because so many shinobi complained about how the stench of alcohol would give them away after drinking it if they tried to go on a mission, so a new ingredient was added to disguise the smell. It does give a slight sense of euphoria though, which is probably why you all enjoy it so much, but you won't suffer any side effects like if you drank sake. Harry? Hermione whispered quietly, staring at the spot opposite of Kakashi, 2 butterbeers in her hand. Over here, he muttered. Upon hearing his voice, she sighed in relief. I told you, Naruto sulked, pulling a chair back and taking a drink of his butterbeer. Hermione blushed in embarrassment. I just didn't think it was possible, she tried to say in defense. The blonde rolled his eyes and returned to his butterbeer, clearly enjoying it. What are you doing here, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto decided to ask instead. Just scouting out the village, he replied calmly, pausing for a second in his reading to smile at his student. Despite what Kakashi told him earlier, Harry also had a sinking feeling that the Jounin was also keeping an eye on him, just like Dumbledore had told him to do. He clenched the glass of butterbeer Hermione had slipped to him underneath his cloak tightly as he took a sip. Why do I always have to be babied and looked after? He liked Kakashi, but the fact that he was on orders to watch him still angered the wizard. So you were able to sense Harry too, Kakashi? Hermione asked. He nodded. You'll find that our abilities allow us to do many things you wouldn't be able to believe, Ms. Granger. He paused for a second. Just like I can tell you that Hagrid and Professor Moody are about to enter. All three children directed their attention to the front door, where surprisingly enough, the large, bulky frame of Hagrid entered, followed by the hobbling Mad-Eye. Hermione's mouth was slightly open, amazed that she found herself again bested by her lack of knowledge in the capabilities of the foreigners. They watched as the duo made their way to the counter where Hagrid ordered an enormous tankard of who knows what, while Moody preferred to drink from his hip flask, much to Rosmerta's annoyance. Harry knew better though. Moody simply believed it was safer to drink from his own hip flask than trust anyone else, due to the fact that he was so paranoid about some dark wizard poisoning his drink. As the two talked, Harry noticed in confusion how Moody's swiveling eye seemed to focus in on Gara, who appeared to be drinking his second butterbeer, and then it spun around so fast it made his head hurt until it zeroed in on them. The Auror whispered something to Hagrid, who glanced up suddenly and turned his attention to their table, and broke out in a grin. Before long they both made their way over. "All right, Hermione? Naruto? Kakashi?" said Hagrid loudly. The three nodded. "Nice cloak, Potter," Moody wheezed. "So you can see me too?" Harry sighed. Mad-Eye appeared confused for a moment, then glanced at Kakashi and grinned, but not before Naruto noticed the strange glint in the man's eye. Hagrid was simply beaming, not able to see Harry himself but impressed with the fact that he was there anyway. As Moody began to leave with a quick nod of his head, Hagrid leaned forward as if to glance at Kakashi's book and threw a quick nervous glance at Kakashi. "Harry, meet me tonight at midnight at me cabin. Wear that cloak." With another uneasy glance at Kakashi he straightened up and said loudly, "Nice to see you all again," with a wink before departing after Moody. Why would he want to see me at midnight? Harry wondered aloud. "He does," Hermione said, looking startled. "What could he possibly want to show you?" she gasped. "It probably isn't a good idea, you know. It might make you late for your appointment," she hissed in an undertone, not daring to say Sirius's name in front of the shinobi. Harry's eyes widened as he realized she was right, then came across another sinking thought, one that he would have to discuss without the shinobi around. If you'll excuse us, we have something personal to discuss," he said nervously, not quite sure how to get away from them politely. Kakashi nodded, still engrossed in the book, acting as if he didn't find their behavior peculiar at all, while Naruto peered at them warily. "Yeah, sorry for having to leave you too, but we have to get going," Hermione finished, just as nervously. After a small awkward pause the two hastily exited, with Harry keeping watch over the shinobi, just in case they decided to follow them. Once they were gone, Kakashi closed a brief history of notable dragons and leaned forward, speaking in a low voice. "Listen carefully, Naruto, because I'll need you to give these instructions to Gara as well. Tonight we need to." "Is the coast clear?" Hermione muttered, pretending to rub her hands together and blow on them. Harry nodded. "Don't worry about getting back, I won't be gone long. Now, the thing we have to worry about is Gara. Sirius said to meet him by the fire at 1 a.m., and he never sleeps." She gasped as she realized what Harry was getting at. "This is terrible. How can we distract him? It's not like I could invite him to come do something. Maybe you could ask." No. He was seriously getting fed up with Hermione's constant attempts to repair his and Ron's friendship for them. "We just need to figure out another way to make sure he's not in the Gryffindor Tower when Sirius arrives." Come 11:30, Harry was astonished at his luck. Gara had left with Kakashi around 10 to help him out with something, and Naruto had gone to bed early, suffering the downfall of his sugar high he had achieved from the butterbeer he had drank earlier. It was not a pretty sight, Naruto on a sugar high. He was immensely grateful when the blonde decided to go to bed. And so, with a slight sense of trepidation mixed in with his amazement, Harry made his way to Hagrid's cabin, and knocked on the door, the action of which was followed immediately by Fang's howls. "You there, Harry?" Hagrid whispered upon opening the door, peering through the dark. "Yeah." A couple minutes later Harry was incredibly confused, wondering why Hagrid had seemed to completely forget him and was escorting. He shuddered a little at the strange sight, Madame Maxime around the perimeter of the forest, but all was forgotten when they were out of sight of the castle. He simply couldn't believe his eyes. Dragons? Standing before him were enormous, ferocious-looking dragons tethered to a large enclosure, spewing torrents of fire from their nostrils and fanged mouths, clearly not pleased with their current predicament. There was a flurry of men rushing about trying to calm the beasts, and Harry was at a loss to how they were able to contain them. Suetun, Daibaku no Jutsu. Harry glanced off towards his left where a tree had been lit on fire and was startled as a large column of water came out of the lake towards the tree, effectively suffocating the fire, leaving behind a charred stump in its wake. He noticed Kakashi standing with his back to the group, clearly there to prevent the dragons from burning down the castle grounds. Sabaka Soshu. Turning to his right, Harry noticed Gaara there as well, surrounding a burning bush with his sand and crushing it, effectively smothering the flames. So this is what Kakashi wanted him to do. Suddenly he remembered how the shinobi could sense his presence, and how Kakashi could even see him with that freaky eye of his, and ducked behind a bush. Then after further observance of the shinobi concluded that they had enough on their hands to notice he was there. However, he did have to leave soon if he wanted to make his meeting with Sirius. As he rushed into the common room a while later, Harry noticed with relief that there was no one there, and Hermione didn't have to use any dumb bombs to clear it out. The smell would have put a damper on his reunion with his beloved godfather. He put his cloak down on the couch, slightly perturbed by the revelation that Ron had known about the dragons without telling him, and the mere fact that the first task had to do with dragons. How was he supposed to maneuver around a dragon with everyone looking? With a sigh, Harry turned his direction to the fireplace, and nearly had a heart attack at Sirius's head floating in midair. After overcoming his initial fright, he calmed down and began to have a pleasant conversation with his godfather, despite the foreboding topic they discussed. It was ended abruptly when Harry heard someone coming down the stairs. Afraid it was Naruto, Harry reluctantly told his godfather to leave, then waited in anticipation for whoever was coming downstairs. To his dismay, it only turned out to be Ron. After chucking a badge up to his friend and storming off, Harry fell into an uneasy sleep, with Ron coming up a little after. Once the common room was silent again, Naruto let out a deep breath and emerged from the wall, having previously merged with it, Earth-style. Kakashi had spent the rest of the day once Harry and Ron had left, teaching him the jutsu. As he panted from the chakra drain, Naruto chuckled gleefully at his success. He couldn't believe it. Kakashi had been thoroughly impressed with his progress, being able to learn quite an advanced skill in so short a time. His sensei had figured something was up between Harry and Hermione, and made a clone hinged into a dog follow them secretly as they left, learning that Harry was going to be meeting some strange man at 1 a.m, and they were worried about Gaara overseeing the encounter. He informed Naruto that he guessed Hagrid wanted to show Harry the dragons, reason being that he had been asked to assist the dragon keepers that night. Because it was his duty to make sure Harry was safe and nothing went wrong, he had instructed Naruto to oversee the exchange, while Gaara assisted him in containing the dragons with his sand. The genin was quite pleased that his sensei had entrusted such an important task to him, and while he wished he could have the chance to see the dragons, he knew that he was better suited for the task he had been given. Besides, Kakashi told him that he needed to work on his stealth anyway. Mission completed. He congratulated himself. His face fell slightly though, as he recalled the previous incident between Harry and Ron. After Harry had run past the redhead, Ron stood there for a few moments, completely stunned, then picked up the badge that had collided with his forehead, rubbing it gingerly. In frustration he tossed it into the fire where Sirius's face had previously been. Naruto was still amazed how that had happened, and wished he had a better view of the head, but there was no way he could move without being seen, where it blew up in flames. Once the flames died down, Ron kicked the couch angrily, tears welling up in his eyes, and he collapsed on his favorite chair in defeat, staring off into space in despair. He looked so sad that Naruto resisted the urge to go over and cheer him up, but that would only cause more problems. In fact, he might even give Ron a heart attack, because he was sure these wizards had never seen anyone merge with a wall before. Finally, the sullen boy left the common room and trudged back upstairs, just as Naruto was about to release the jutsu, seeing as Hoyt took a lot of chakra and he had just barely learned it. He reached behind a picture frame on the nearest coffee table and pulled out a small glass of butterbeer that he had placed there before Harry returned, and happily started drinking it as he waited for Kakashi and Gaara to return. When the two shinobi finally did return, their arrival was welcomed with Naruto's sleeping form strewn across the couch, a glass of almost finished butterbeer held loosely in his hand across his chest, with the remains slowly dripping onto his shirt. Gaara sighed and brought out his wand, effectively cleaning his friend's shirt. Kakashi chuckled at the sight and gently lifted the genin into his arms. I guess we'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out what happened. Gaara nodded and threw away the bottle while Kakashi carefully carried his exhausted student to bed. As he watched the sleeping form of the boy, he sighed at the prospect of being pounced on the moment Naruto got up, the youth demanding for information about the dragons. He knew the boy really wanted to see them, but it was better for him to learn that new jutsu and know his sensei entrusted him with such responsibility. The Jounin couldn't explain why, but this particular student always made him want to make the genin happy, because it was difficult to see Naruto without that signature smile on his face, an exact replica of his father's, Kakashi's beloved sensei. Sweet dreams, Naruto, he whispered. Before Harry knew it, it was the day before the first task, and he had no idea what to do. He had just told Cedric about the dragons, and was frightened when Moody asked him to follow him, fully prepared to be reprimanded. And so, it was with utter surprise that he learned Moody somewhat congratulated him, and then gave him a little advice on what to do. He needed Hermione, that much was certain. In order to play to his strength, he needed her help in learning how to perfect his summoning charm, by tomorrow. His search led him to the courtyard, where there was a wide open space surrounded by open halls with rooms on one side and pillars opposite of them leading into the clearing. Harry groaned as he found Hermione, for among the crowd she was with, Gara, Naruto, Fred, and George, Ron was there as well. Harry still hadn't forgiven him for not telling him about the dragons. There will be time for that later, he reasoned. Hermione! He called out, ignoring the angry scowl on Ron's face. What is it? She asked, raising her eyebrow in bewilderment at his hurried appearance, wondering if something was wrong. I've got to ask you. Foreigners. Harry spun around to notice one of his least favorite people behind him, a smug look pasted on his pale face. Gara and Naruto scowled and faced the blonde boy. Naruto with his hands behind his head and eyes in narrow slits, and Gara with his arms folded, either of them in the mood for dealing with Draco at the moment. Harry sighed and wondered what the boy had in store for them this time. Malfoy snickered and walked to the door closest to him, placing his hand on the door handle with his wand directed at it. Alohomora, he whispered before swinging the door open. As soon as it opened, he jumped out of the way, and the shinobi realized all too late that this was not going to be good. A pale hand reached out of the shadows, followed by an arm, then purple eyes and short, yellow hair. What if Naruto was summoned to Hogwarts Harry Potter? End here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.